There is a place where fears and fantasies get weighed on substance alone. Legends and lures are examined in a fresh light. Conspiracy theory meets conspiracy fact. We've embraced the possibilities. Now beyond the threshold, you are in the new realm.
Just out of nowhere, we've seen this huge white light coming in over the horizon and south.
I started getting this demonic thought, strange object in the sky. And I tried to scream, and I tried to wake up, and I couldn't.
Cosmology, paranormal, and abduction.
A shadow people or the jinn or some other things might fall demonic in nature. Demonic in nature.
I want to know. Alright, this is Aunt K. We're back with part 2 of episode 1 on our brand new show here, The New Realms. And I promised you on this show we would have Stanton Friedman, Richard Dolan. I got an awesome guy that I'd like to have open up the show with. He's got a very interesting topic to talk about. Everything from, this guy has so many interesting topics. Everything from the Cosmic Federation, like a Universal Senate, if you may. But he runs I.C.A.R. His name's Joe Montaldo. He'll be on in a few seconds here, and his study is mainly with alien abduction cases. And to be honest with you, he's got some really interesting stories, and he's got a lot of research and a lot of proof, a lot of evidence, and we have a great discussion. So check that out. You're listening to The New Realms. I'm Anthony K.
Welcome back. With us now is my good friend Joe Montaldo, co-founder of the I.C.A.R, which is the International Community for Alien Research, also host of UFO Undercover, and the owner of the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is one of the networks we're broadcast on. I'm going to welcome you into the show tonight, Joe, and how are things going with you this evening?
Pretty good, John. Nice to talk to you. Been actually a long time no talk to, so it's always good to hear from you.
Yeah, first time you've actually been on our show, and I guess that's rude on my part since UFO Paranormal Radio Network is one of the networks we're hosted on.
Yeah, that's okay, though. I know we both keep busy schedules, so that's not a big thing. It's one of those things that, unfortunately, when you do radio and research, there never seems to be enough time.
Yes, I know how that is.
I could really use a time-traveling machine.
Yes, we don't want to get into that, but according to a few people, there already is one.
Well, see, why don't y'all send me and John one? We'll take it out, give it a spin, let you know how it works.
Oh, could I use one of those things? No. So, you're saying here you're the co-founder or one of the co-founders of I.C.A.R. Do you want to tell people what that's about for people that have no idea?
Well, it's a good idea because I.C.A.R. doesn't get talked about near much as it should when I'm doing radio interviews. And I.C.A.R. first off, it's www.ICAR1.com. You can go there and check out the site. I.C.A.R. is the largest UFO abduction organization on the planet as of today. It's 27,500 members strong. It's about 15 times the size of MUFON. Matter of fact, the only organization out there that's actually bigger than I.C.A.R. is the Raelian group, the Real, and we don't really consider them a real group because, let's be honest, they're a sex cult. So, we have to leave it at the sex cult and leave it like that. And it's just one of those things. But the international community, boy, it's getting noisy all of a sudden around here. The International Community for Alien Research, though, is by far the largest UFO organization on the planet, and all we really do is abduction research. I mean, we mess with sightings. If you do have a good sighting, and let me make this really nice. If you have a good sighting, like a multiple witness sighting, or you have videotape or photographs with eyewitness testimony, we're interested in that. Not to be rude, things like red lights in the sky, dots in the sky, white lights crossing the sky, we're not really interested in it because there's nothing we can do with it. I mean, if you send it to us, all we're going to do is send it over to MUFON or to Peter Davenport or to Larry Hatcher or to George Filer. One of them that's all we're going to do with it is we're going to send it to one of those organizations because it's not something we track and it's not something we get involved with. But like I said, if it's got eyewitness testimony, really good videotape, really good photographs, or any sighting that may correlate with a abduction, we're interested in. Matter of fact, we're always interested in any sightings that correlate to alien abduction cases. A lot of times, to put this into perspective, just recently in your hometown, not far from the Great Lakes, lady calls in about actually, there was a couple of them out by the Great Lakes. They're talking. They call in. What they said was this was a green kind of chevron shaped thing going across the thing. They watched it. It was 8 o'clock when they seen it. The next thing they know, they're at home. It's midnight. Don't know. They really don't remember anything from the time they seen the Chevron craft to the time they got home. These were especially interested in. This sounds like an active abduction or abduction in progress. They seen the craft and then were taken. And most contactees will either see the craft before they're taken or right after they're put back. They tend to see a UFO. So what it means, I have no idea, but it is something that we do track on a regular basis because it does seem to happen a lot.
And there's usually that time loss too, isn't there? Isn't that a common thing?
Well, not as that. I'm glad you brought that up because in the old days, lost time was a big thing in the field. Around '96, I.C.A.R. uncovered. Well, it wasn't even I.C.A.R. at the time, but we uncovered something new. We had noticed a big drop in lost time cases, and we couldn't figure out why. We knew abductions weren't stopping, so we were trying to figure it out. Well, we stumbled across a case in Gulf Breeze, Florida. A couple was down there on vacation. Make a long story short, they were checked into the hotel. They left their hotel to go to the beach. So they leave their hotel. The video camera shows them what time they're leaving the hotel. They get to the convenience store where they stopped to buy a Coke and whatever else. And it happened to be at shift change, which was 11 o'clock. So they were changing shifts. So the tellers remember seeing these people in the store. They said they were talking about them and they were talking about aliens and UFOs and stuff. So they remembered them. The people at the hotel remembered them as well. So long story short, they leave there. They drive to the beach. They walk out on the beach. They're sitting on the beach. They out there. Some weird stuff happened. So they leave to go home that night. They get in their car and they found a ticket, a parking ticket, inside the car next to the shifter column. It was one of those center console shifters. It was slid between the seat, and now the car was locked. They had locked the car, and the car was locked when they got back, but yet here was this ticket sitting next to the shifter. Okay, well, usually if a cop writes a ticket, he's going to put it under your windshield. It's a parking violation, So it's in the car. So that's, it's weird, but it's not beyond maybe the cop. Maybe they forgot to lock the door and the cop just stuck it in between the seats. I still think it's weird, but anyway. So they get back to the hotel. They're looking at the ticket. The ticket was written at 10:05. Now, the hotel cameras have that car in the parking lot at 10:05. Okay, and I just told you both the hotel and the convenience store clerks seen these people at 11 o'clock. So we know they got to the beach at 11 o'clock, but yet the ticket says 10:05. How is it possible? So we called the officer to see if it was a misprint or maybe it was a time zone thing. No, the officer said no. I was on patrol. He said, matter of fact, he's off at 11 o'clock. He was back at the station at 10:30. So he physically seen that car there at 10:05 and wrote the ticket. And he said he slid the ticket on the side of the window. He don't know how it got in the car. So now, how is this possible? He's there at 10:05 writing the ticket, but the hotel has the car at the hotel at 10:05. It's sitting in the parking lot. I mean, we got the tape. You can actually see it sitting in the parking lot. But he actually has the video footage from his camera saying 10:05. He's got it on film at the place, at the location, where it was at 11:05. So, at first we just kept thinking this was some kind of screw-up, but then we realized it wasn't. What they do is they have the ability to take you out of time and then bring you back. So they can bring you back to several hours before you left, to several minutes before you left, so there is no missing time anymore. We call it gain time or even time. They're either gaining time or they're even in time. And by having you see, so they're there, they were actually taken and put back. The car was actually put back at 10:05. It's the weirdest thing we've ever run across. None of it makes any sense to me. Somehow or another, they're pulling people out of our reality for whatever length of time and then putting them back before they take them. Wow. I don't even know how they're not running into each other. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's a weird thing, but we've run across this more than once. And then what they started doing is they changed the way they do memories. They used to do exclusively cover memories. Now they got very slick about this. What they will do is they will take a memory from your head and loop the memory. Instead of putting in a memory you're going to question, like a false memory or something not real, they give you something mundane, something you do every day, whether it's the drive to work, bringing your kids to school, having lunch, whatever. It's something that you do often, something you're not going to question. You're just going to say, okay, well, I was on my way to work. The reason this backfires in E.T.'s face every once in a while, here's one for you. One couple's driving home one day, and they get in this big fight they had gotten in this big fight one day driving to work. And ET used this same memory. They looped it, but it was 10 years later.
Okay.
So they're actually driving down this highway where this happened. As they passed this store where she used to work, they got into a major fight and couldn't figure out why, because they were re-looping the memory. It was a false memory. It was a real memory, but it had been re-looped, so they relived the damn experience. And of course, it was a fight. And then they realized, well, wait, this happened 10 years ago. They realized it was a problem then. Well, why are we fighting about something 10 years ago when it happened 10 years ago, but yet it feels like it just happened just now? So we had that case. And then one lady calls me. She drives every day to work. On the way to work, she used to stop at this little hot dog stand and get her a little chili cheese dog every day, right? So she gets abducted one day, and she's got this memory in her head. No big deal. But they had closed the hot dog stand 2 weeks earlier.
Okay.
So that morning in her head, she's got to drive to work where she stops at the hot dog stand and gets the hot dog. But of course, it never happened because the hot dog stand was gone. So they make little mistakes that if you pay attention to that you catch. And they don't make a lot of mistakes, mind you, but they do.
When you do regressions on people, can you catch these kind of things?
Yeah, a lot of times, though, you can catch them without doing regression. But even in regression, you will. I mean, like I was talking to you earlier, there's layers and layers and layers of regression we do. But first and foremost, what I.C.A.R will do, they will meet someone. We will bring them in for an interview, whether it's a phone, internet, or in-person interview, depending on where they are. And we will interview them. And, we do a line of questioning to see what kind of keywords we'll find. We're talking to them to get them to tell us about events or things that happened or suspicious things to them. And we're looking for keywords, things we expect to hear from someone who's been taken. Whether they know it or not, we still expect to hear it. And usually after you get enough of those, we'll really get down and introduce them to some other contactees and some other investigators. We will try to draw out as much information from the person we can without using hypnosis. But there sometimes comes a point where the person just can't go any further. The memories are too hardly or too strongly blocked or too strongly locked down. So then we will use regression. But I'm going to tell you something. We're very strict about regression. First and foremost, we tell everybody the same thing. Bring someone with you implicitly trust. Because we want you to feel comfortable, so bring someone with you that you trust. Secondly, always videotape everything you do. And thirdly, and more importantly, when you start the regression, decide ahead of time what you're going to talk about. So with the very first regression, this is what it's going to be. I'm going to say, okay, Janine, I want you to tell me about the event that happened on October 21st of 1999. And I want you to tell me the whole event without stopping. Then they'll tell me the whole event, and then I will stop them. And then I will ask them to repeat that event from backwards forward. After that, we stop the videotape, we get everybody together, we review everything, and then we come up with a line of questioning that doesn't use words like alien, extraterrestrial, alien beings, gray, anything like that. Like the girl the other day, she's telling me about the being that she's seen. I said, okay, describe to me what you're seeing. She said, you want me to describe the person? No, I said, I want you to describe what it is that you're seeing. What does this thing look like? I don't want to use any words that could be considered leading the witness. We want them to answer this in their own words. It's the only way we're going to ever get to the truth is to get them to use their words and not ours. So words like extraterrestrial, spacecraft, grays are all banned from the conversation. You won't hear a word like that used until we're like 10 or 15 regressions in and we're looking for specific data about a specific contact. Being, like she said, all this happened in an event, then we're going to ask her, well, what did this being do? How did this procedure go? What does it actually look like? How does its hands and feet look like? Does there any smells, any vibrations, any sounds? All of this stuff, and that's how we've learned a lot. We've learned that the gray ships are organic. They're grown. They're not a mechanical technology like we use. They're an organic technology, much more advanced. Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah, the grays interface with their ships. They actually interface. When a gray gets into the ship, it will actually sit down in the ship and merge with the damn craft. There's no physical instrumentation. Everything's done by telepathy. So it's a much more advanced form of craft. And when they do need physical stuff, it melds out of the wall like the ship makes it as it needs it. The tables actually come up from the floor and then expand out. And when they put the person down on the table actually molds and confirms to the person and then wraps itself around the person. And then it can completely engulf the person.
And these are things you've actually heard when you're going through regression and things like that.
And these aren't things we've heard one time. These are things we've heard hundreds of times.
Right.
See, for it to be abduction criteria, we need to hear it from more than 100 witnesses. These days, we've actually got some of them from more than 1,000 witnesses. And since a lot of this isn't made public, it's easier for us to determine if it's a lie or if it's the truth. Because we will make some, like the blue plasma on the gray ship. Mm-hmm. The blue plasma took us decades to figure out what it was. It's a fuel source for the ship. It's a self-replicating fuel source for the ship. But not just that. The grays actually absorb it as food through their skin. They actually immerse humans in it to help them heal and to rejuvenate their cells. This is how we found out about it, because we used to have all these contactees talk about this weird color blue. Some people said they felt like they were being drowned or immersed. Some people said it was always around them. Some people said they seen the grays sitting in it and stuff. But no one could figure out what it was. And then so what we did is we took 100 contactees and planted a question. What is the blue plasma, or what is the blue color? And we told 100 different contactees this, and as over the course of 2 or 3 weeks as they were being taken, what we do them is every night before they would go to bed, we have them repeat these questions in their head. So what happens is when the gray takes you, or any alien takes you, it's subconscious. Your subconscious automatically, telepathically sends this to the gray's head. The grays will answer most times without even thinking. Mm-hmm. Because they're all so in each other's head so much that they will just actually answer the question back. Well, when you get 100 witnesses to come back and tell you the exact same thing, and you only told each individual the question, you didn't share it with everybody else, and nobody knew who the other witnesses were going to be, it's almost impossible that it's not true.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's a comparison study, and we do a lot of this kind of stuff, and we've been doing a lot of this kind of stuff for more than a decade now.
A lot of these people that are abducted, are they abducted multiple times then?
All abductees are abducted. See, the thing about abductees, and this is more importantly, there's no such thing as a one-time abductee. Mm-hmm. I know, people want to say there is, but there's not. None that we've ever met, and we'll get into this more, but what it comes down to is ET abducts in family lines, and this started probably 10,000 to 100,000 years ago. Somewhere along the line, they intervened in our family lines, either interbred or somehow got involved in our family lines. They only abduct inside those family lines. In other words, the grays are taking contactees that are closely related to them. So are the humans and the reptilians. They're actually abducting people from those family lines. And each generation of children, of course, their gifts get a little better. We've been tracking this for 3 decades. Telepathic children and contactee families seem to get better with each generation. Their empathic and telepathic abilities seem to expand exponentially as each generation progresses. So it's been an interesting thing to watch happen. And so we know now that there's actually a progression, like to help people who are listening understand what I'm talking about. Abductions start pre-birth, okay? While you're still in your mother's womb, you're being abducted. You're put back. Children talk about aliens all the time, just parents don't want to hear about it. They talk about my little bug-eyed friend, my little gray friend, my little blue friend, my little reptilian friend. Grays will manifest. I cannot tell you how many invisible friends have turned out to be grays or reptilians or humans. And you just think your child's just, being a normal kid and imagining things. You don't even question it. But, we expect, imaginary children to be in the contactees lines, and it's prevalent. If you took 100 contactees and 100 people off the street, those 100 contactees, probably 90 of them had invisible friends. Those same 100 people off the street, maybe 5 did. And if that. So it's a weird thing to actually watch happen. So we see things like this on a regular basis. So we just keep categorizing, keep adding to the database, keep doing comparison studies and seeing what's the same, what's not the same, what can we expect to happen in an abduction of this kind. And so we are learning. We also know that in the old days everybody always thought the grays worked for the reptilians and the human aliens. Well, we know that's a crock. We know that both the reptilians and the human aliens are scared of the grays. Their telepathic ability far exceeds either one of the other 2 races, and their technology far exceeds them. There was so many misnomers. First off, a gray is not even gray. There's no such thing as a really gray. They're not actually gray. Grays come in 3 different colors, and actually, when they eat that blue plasma we were talking about, they absorb it through their skin. Mm-hmm. If you see them right after feeding, they're kind of like an electric cobalt blue color. Wow. If you see them when they haven't eaten for a few days, they're almost translucent looking, like a kind of a grayish, whitish, translucent looking color. And there's every shade in between there. So it really depends when you see them what color they're going to appear to you. But more importantly than that, they're also a brown and white grays, because we just call them grays, so we just say brown and white grays. But grays start in 3 foot. They got 3 foot grays. We think that there's a living 3 foot gray, and then we think there's a what do you call them? A cyborg gray. It's half alive, half robot. Okay. Then we know there's a 5 foot gray. In all 3 colors, we know there's a 5 foot gray. We also know there's a 7 foot gray in all 3 colors. Wow. So we've been tracking this for a long time, and I think a lot of people mistake the tall grays as the praying mantis. And these are all
collaborated through multiple people.
Through multiple people.
That don't know each other, and they're all coming up with the same type of descriptions and everything.
They're giving us the same type of technology and the same type of descriptions. Wow. It's like with the reptilians. We always wanted to do all reptilian males and females have tails. Come to find out, only the dominant ones do. The alpha males and the alpha females have tails. All the rest of them don't.
Actually, speaking of reptilians, before, you can do it now or later if you want, but tell everyone that story you were telling me about during Katrina in New Orleans, too.
This is interesting because I know a lot of people hear about this story and they don't know what the source is. The source comes from, there was a half a dozen or more, probably closer to about 9 or 10, National Guard and New Orleans Police Department, New Orleans police officers. Right after Katrina, we were home about 3 days after Katrina. There was still water in the city. And I get a phone call from a New Orleans police officer saying that he saw a reptilian, actually saw 3 reptilians walking through the water on Esplanade Avenue, which is right outside the French Quarter. And I was kind of like, oh, he's pulling my leg, blah, 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 blah. A couple of days later, I get 3 more cops call in with the same story. A couple of days after that, a National Guard guy calls. A couple of days after that, a couple more National Guard calls call me. All together, I talked to, like I said, 9 or 10 of them, all basically saying the same thing. That they were on Esplanade, walking in the water when they seen these reptilians walking towards them. Now, this is what's really weird about this. National Guard's talking to me. He said there was 4 of them walking together when they seen the 3 reptilians. He said you would have thought the first thing I would have done was took my M16 off my shoulder and pointed at him.
Right.
He said, but no time did I ever even think about grabbing my gun. And he said it's so funny because he said I remember walking up towards them thinking, oh my God, what is this? And the next thing I remember is I'm walking away from them and they're disappearing off in the distance. And all the accounts were basically the same way. Even the cop in the boat said, I was going up to him in the boat and I remember getting real close to him, and the next thing I know, I'm going the opposite way away from him. Wow. And that's pretty much what they were talking about. And, these accounts were good. And then we started getting other accounts after that of people being taken to, like, the UNO arena. They said they had a mock mall set up in there, and the reptilians were using people to help them to establish crowd control and other weird stuff. What all of that means is beyond me. I mean, it's really weird stuff to start off with. And but when you have corroborated stories like that, especially from people that aren't from here, all the National Guard people, none of them were local.
And these people you interviewed individually. It sounds as if you had them all in a room. They all were individual, and they all came up with this same exact thing.
And only 2 of them even knew who the other ones were. Only 2 of them knew each other. None of the other ones even knew each other. And what got me is 4 of the National Guard guys who had just come back from Kuwait. I mean, from Iraq. Mm-hmm. And so these were soldiers that were in the field that have had action and still never even bothered pulling their gun out towards these reptilians. So there must be some kind of mind trick or something going on there, some kind of mind control going on as they're approaching these reps, because no shots were fired, none of that was fired. And the simple fact that they were roaming around in the city after Katrina kind of weirds me out to start off with. The water was deep. Where they were was about 6 feet deep. And the guy, and that's another funny part, he says, because the water on 2 of the cops were telling me the water was about chest deep to them, but seemed to be barely above the reptilians' waist. Wow, so they were big. Yeah, they big. They big. And most people say the reptilians are around 7 foot tall, 500 to 600 pounds. The big males are. So the big females. So they talk about that a lot. They're big, big, big. But the reps get a bad rap because really and truly, in the research, they sound more like us than any of the other species do. Wow. They seem to have a base religion. Maybe it's one religion, but they seem, they got 5 fingers, 5 toes. They got nose, ears, eyes. They're basically the same shape as us, except they got, a reptilian appearance. They got a ridged head and a weird-looking nose and, some other features that we're not going to talk about because they're abduction criteria. But still, their overall behavior and attitude is more like the humans are than it's not. And to drive this part home, I know a lot of y'all watch Ancient Aliens, so I'm going to give y'all a quick lesson on the real Ancient Aliens. The Sumerians say, this is actually written in the text. I don't know why this is so hard for everybody. The Sumerians say, a long time ago, this human-looking race appeared. It's how they say it. They don't even say they look just like us. They said they appeared on our planet, but they couldn't breathe the atmosphere of the planet, so they built 2 great white dome cities that they could live in. So they moved in these cities. That race created races just like themselves, but could breathe the atmosphere in an alien that could move around and meld around a planet. This is all written in text. None of this is being ad-libbed or anything else. So they ruled for a long time, but they said they wanted to know somewhere along that line, that group decided, well, wait, we're just as omnipotent as that group is. Why are we digging ditches and plowing fields and mining stuff? So they created what the Sumerians call the 7 creations of man. The last creation is a race just like the one here today, but not exactly. Let me explain. The race they created could do things like procreate. They could plow the fields. They could name the animals. They could make beer and stuff like that. But they never asked why they had to do it. They were never sentient in the way we understand sentience. Now, the Sumerians say this went on for 1,000 years or so, and then the reptilians showed up. And the reptilians used to come and steal and rape their women. And they kept saying the children were being born different. Originally, I thought they meant the children looked different. But after reading enough of the text, I realized that's not what they were saying. The children looked just like everybody else did. They just acted differently. Eventually, those children overthrew those aliens. They wanted them out. They had become self-aware is what had happened. These children being born were now aware. They're thinking, well, why are we plowing a field? Why don't you plow the damn field?
Right.
We're not your slave. What the hell is this about? So now you have a race that's part reptilian, part human, alien. Whether they were part anything else, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there was something that the aliens used to create us, or if they made us from a piece of their cells and just dumbed us down. I don't really know. But we do know for science fact that every human on this planet has a reptilian section in their brain, and it's a very important section. It is the section that makes you who and what you are. It's a section that makes you ask why. Okay, it's a very important section. It's a primal section of the brain, but it's a very important section of the brain. It's the one that makes you stand up for who and what you are. So knowing this is very important when you read the old text. And the Dogon get into this in a great detail, and so do the Egyptians. Something else you will find in every major culture on the planet, they worship the reptilian. They don't hate the reptilian. They say that the bringers of life and the bringers of actually several things. It's the human aliens that are considered evil and nasty in the ancient world. The Egyptians portray them as humans with hyena heads and all kind of stuff because they were vicious. Mm-hmm. Now, to drive this point home, I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Adolf Hitler in his book called Mein Kampf. In his book, he talks about these fair-haired, blue-eyed angels that used to come and tell him what to do, like his genetic experiments and all. Mm-hmm. So we know that the aliens do genetic experiments. We know that it's fact. You know, that's something that happens on a daily basis. Well, here now you have a correlation with Nazi Germany, Hitler, and the aliens, and the type of experiments are being done. So when it comes right down to it, I wouldn't consider the human aliens to be friendly, loving, peace light, or anything else for that matter. I'd be more concerned that they may be the more vicious of the three that are visiting the planet right now. Or let me put this another way, the ones least concerned with the humans overall, what happens to us. We may be related to them, but I don't think they think of us as anything more than like distant trash cousins or something. The reason they say the Greys got involved, because if you look at your ancient history, you won't find the Greys until about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Prior to that, the Greys didn't seem to exist on the planet. Even though the humans and reptilians are talked about a lot, the Grey is on. According to the ancient world, the humans and the reptilians were about to get into a major nasty fight over the planet. And the Greys showed up. They were, I guess, became the policemen to oversee what was going on this planet. I guess the humans wanted to keep it, or the reptilians wanted to keep it. Somebody wanted the planet, and the Greys showed up. So now we now have 3 races on the planet, and now we have 3 sources of DNA inside of the abductees on the planet. It gets a little sticky wicked up in here. Mm-hmm. You know, so and more importantly than that, the reptilians say they're native to Earth, that they were here and had to leave when the meteor hit the planet 63 million years ago. They had to leave and colonize somewhere else until the planet was livable again. But that's what they're saying. Well, to drive this point home, there's something called the Map of the Creator. It's on the Prevada website. It's sitting in a museum in Russia right now. This map is an aerial resource map dated 120 million years ago. There's no humans on the planet 120 million years. And by the way, no archaeologists argue this date on this map. Mm-hmm. So here's a map you have taken from an aerial view. So whoever made this map could see the valley it was in from an aerial source 120 million years ago. Well, we were taught that's impossible. No one's supposed to be here 120 million years ago. And frankly, nothing should have been flying in the sky more than 300 years ago. So what the hell was it? How was something flying back then, and how could anything exist to create a map 120 million years ago? Well, being that dinosaurs ruled the planet for 200 million years, it's highly unlikely that something intelligent didn't evolve in that time frame. Remember, it only took humans 4 million years to evolve to what we are today. So in 200 million years, the odds are in somebody's favor that the reptilians evolved. So it looks like they may have actually been native to the planet. Now, the argument is they left, they came back. Is it still their planet? Well, let me ask you this. If your great-great-great-great-grandpa owned land in California and he died and you didn't find out about it till today and you went out there today and there's people living on it, is it their land or is it your land? What is California going to say? That California going to say it's your land and they got to get off of, sorry, beep, to get the mess off of it. Sorry about that, y'all. Didn't mean to use that word. But anyway, that's what they're going to tell them. So it gets a bit of weird there. But it doesn't seem like that's what the reptilians really want. I don't think they're here to evict us off the planet or any of that. They really do seem like they're wanting to work more on a ongoing line with us. And I really do think that they would be more willing to share the planet if we were. I don't think they're the problem. I think we're the problem. And so on, people understand reptilians a bad word. They're warm-blooded and amphibians. We found that they were amphibians a long time ago. They have gills in an area which I can't say because it's abduction criteria. There's some special features about their hands and their feet which are also abduction criteria. But if you've seen one, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The thing about it is they seem to, and it makes more sense to me. If you're going to be the most advanced species on this planet, you would utilize both land and water. I mean, come on, water makes up 77% of the planet.
Exactly.
So the most advanced race should come from the water, and that's what it appears happened. It appears that they were an amphibian race that moved on land that used both the water and the land. And I cannot tell you how many contactees talk about reptilians living underwater or reptilians living on the ground or so on and so forth. It seems to be a common theme with all of this. So
does anyone ever say that they were taken like under the oceans or anything to any?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Actually, there's a couple of good ones I like to talk about. There's a library somewhere now. I don't know if it's on Earth or if it's on another planet with another ocean. I really don't know, but contactees will talk about this place. It's a great big dome. It's actually several domes, but there's a central dome in the middle of all these other domes, and it's like a big city underwater. You walk in, you can walk, the ship comes up to the side, you can walk right through this clear thing into the ship, and it's like a airlock that you walk through, and then you're in the dome. Well, there's this big, huge dome. They say this dome's like the size of a city, like the size of New Orleans, but it's nothing in it. Right in the middle of the dome, there's a pedestal with a ball on top of it, like a big, huge crystal. Mm-hmm. And that's all it is. But it's their library. When you go into it and you place your hand on the ball, whatever you're thinking about manifests itself in the dome. So it's kind of like a hologram library, for a better way of saying it. And I've literally had more than 100 reptilian contactees talk about it, and everyone described it the same way. I left out two things in that because there's two things in there we consider abduction criteria. One, the color of the crystal. One is the color of the crystal, and everybody always says it's the same color. And one is something else that goes on when you activate the thing. And that we keep because we need to know if it's real, because somebody could be listening to this show and say.
And these people are all coming up with the exact same thing, basically, right?
What got me in. That's what got me stuck in this, John. I really, honestly, the first time somebody told me we were abducted by aliens, I told them to go see a psychiatrist.
Right.
I said, "You're nuts." I mean, we're talking 30 years ago, but still, I'm like, "You're nuts. You're crazy. You need to stop smoking or drinking or popping whatever the hell that you're doing." And that was the first person, and then a couple other people told me, and it kept weirding me out because some of these people had excellent careers and families and stuff. If this got out, would really ruin their lives, and I couldn't figure out why they were saying this. I'm like, they're not crazy. They got over normal IQs, and they got families and businesses, and I'm thinking, why would you make a story up like this? Of course, the more I got into it, the more I found out about it, the more I realized that there was something else going on. And even then, for a long time, I thought, well, maybe it's government. Maybe it's something else that the government's doing, or so on and so forth. But after about 10 years of research, I had realized that the planet really was being visited, but I didn't know near what I know now. That's what made me start looking for ways to prove it, ways to find out if things were the same, things that we can expect from them, what may be going on, what may not be going on, what may be government, what might just be fantasy, what might be real. Right. Because there's a lot of that going on. And contactees have a tendency to judge things by the way they were raised and what they understand about their universe. So a lot of times the data is not pure.
Did you find out that some of these contactees, when you go through your interviews and stuff, that it's actually in fact is government instead? I mean, are you coming across these?
We have military abductees, but military abductees are really just contactees that the government has an interest in.
So it's someone they knew was contacted from an alien, and then they abduct them.
This is actually a good thing you brought up. We tell people all the time when they want to go public, be sure you want to go public, because that's one of the ways the government finds contactees. Because contactees that tend to go public are usually advanced contactees that know quite a bit, and that's who the government's actually interested in. They don't give a good blank about Jane and John contactee that doesn't know nothing, but the ones that are flying ships or seeing propulsion systems or maybe talking about agendas, that's who they're interested in. So when you come public, you just told the government, hey, I exist. So it's a good chance if you're legit, you're going to get mill-labbed. So, we tell people to be real careful with that, because it's just one of those things that happens.
Yeah, the government could be more dangerous in your alien encounter.
Oh, yeah. And plus, they're much sloppier when they're covering stuff up in your head, too. They're just not near as efficient as the aliens are.
Say, on the other hand, too, how many times do you come across people that are just delusional, or how do you want to put it? Just it's in their head only. Probably,
if I had to pick a stat on that, I would say 2 out of every 10 people we interview are legitimate contactees. The other 8 can vary from childhood things that happen, like sexual abuse, molestation. Some of it can manifest from drug abuse. Some of it can just be because a person's just a liar. Some of them want to see if they can fool us.
Right.
But maybe it's 3 out of every 10 turn out to be legit, but it's not near as many people as everybody thinks. And you got to go through a lot of bull to get to them. Now, granted, with abduction criteria and a lot of stuff we do these days, it makes it a lot easier on us. But still, somebody who's well researched can really you can waste a lot of time trying to figure out if they're legit or not. If they really take, like, if they sit down and listen to all my archives or listen to a bunch of other people in the archives, they can present themselves as a contactee and not actually be one.
Well, some of those people we were discussing a while ago off air actually believe it themselves, even though it hasn't happened. Is that harder for you to determine because in their mind they do think it's true?
It is, and that's where regression comes in. That's what I was telling you. Sometimes you'll have somebody on deep regression, and instead of an alien popping out, Uncle Bob pops up or something.
Okay.
To put it into perspective, and you're like, oh, well, what the hell? And then all you can really do is bring the person out of it and tell them, no, this has nothing to do with aliens. This is something else, and you really need to seek professional help because it's not something we do. We're not psychologists, and we're not going to mess around someone's head like that. We can offer support in a lot of ways because we've been doing this a long time, but we're not psychologists. So if it's something that's going to manifest itself other than alien, well, yeah, we're sending you somebody else that can help you. And, of course, that's their choice to go or not to go. And some people get mad about it, John, and say, oh, no, you're wrong. It's still alien, even though this came out. I'm like, well, suit yourself. You're going to live in denial, and it's just going to mess your life up even more because contactees start off with are prone to alcohol, drug abuse. Some contactees will never have any problems, and some will have a lot of problems. And what we found, too, is about probably less than 2 or 3% of contactees come forward anyway. 99% of them will be classified, 95% of them will be classified as abductees and will never know anything. Mm-hmm. They will never even suspect that they're being taken. So, we're not even worried about finding them because even they don't know.
Well, that's a good point. How would somebody know? Do you just have a dream all of a sudden? Or why does somebody believe they've been abducted all of a sudden? What are you finding?
Usually it's because someone on board the craft has showed some interest to the aliens that the aliens think they may be useful. So the aliens will trigger what we like to call the awakening. Mm-hmm. Usually it'll start off with weird feelings or manifestation of dreams or sightings, good sightings right after a contact, to let the person know that this is a real event and to find somebody that can actually help them with the event. And a lot of times what's really weirds me out more than anything else is I can't tell you how many times a contactee will come to us with a name in mind. Because they call them keepers. For us, there's abductees, contactees, and keepers, which is three different levels of contact. But mm-hmm. A lot of times, contactees will come forward and look for a particular keeper. My name has been used a lot. Other keepers I know's names have been used a lot.
So they'll actually come back and ask for you when they do this.
Well, because you probably worked with them on board the ship. That's why. Oh, keepers are people that have reached I don't want to say a mutual understanding with the aliens because it's not really true. They do know more than the average contactee is going to know because they're awake a lot more and they're involved a lot more. But they're really just there to help the everyday person get through the experience, whether it's with their hybrid children, whether it's with something going on with the contact. Contact from puberty up until about 28 is horrific. It's rough, man. They do all kind of nasty stuff to you, both physically and mentally. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's another thing we tell people all the time when they ask about regression. I tell them, you don't want to know what happened to you in your 20s. Wow. There's no need to know. There's nothing there that's going to help your understanding of what the aliens are doing. There's just a lot of harsh experiments in there, a lot of taking of fetuses and sperm, a lot of interacting and interbreeding where they'll take you and put you with someone else. See, they might pick you up, John, and pick up Jane Smith down the street and put y'all in a room together or something, and have you physically do it. Or they may just put you on the milker machine and take one of her eggs and put it together somewhere else and put it in somebody else for that matter. You just never know why they do what they do. And they do it differently with different people, but they're running some type of hybrid program. Actually, several types of hybrid.
Apparently, we're like just lab rats or something. I mean, they're just doing experimentation, right?
They do, but then sometimes I get this weird sense, like I was telling you about when we program contactees ask questions. The Greys and the Reptilians, even the humans, sometimes they will act like proud parents when you get something right, like, well, wow, did you see her? She got into my head and got an answer. Damn. And they're all happy. Of course, if it's a question you're not supposed to know, they'll get pissed off and they will punish your ass over it. But the thing about it is they do act like that. So they do have some concern for us. It seems to vary from group to group. In other words, another weird thing we found out, a lot of people's spirits guides have manifest themselves into aliens. One lady I was working with, she had an Indian god. She was always telling me about an Indian god and how it used to do this and do that. And I said, well, let me regress you about your Indian god. And I did, and it turned out to be a Grey.
Wow.
And we find this a lot. Because it's easier, especially for the New Age people, to deal with like Indian gods or dragons or tigers or whatever than an extraterrestrial. ET's scary to a lot of people.
Exactly.
Even if they're friendly, they still seem to be scary to people. So, we see a lot of that kind of manifestation too. So a lot of that goes on. The human type aliens in general, they really are kind of nasty to us. I know everybody always wants you to think they're peace, love, and light and they're the greatest thing on the planet, but you judge them by their actions, like we talked about the Hitler thing. Judging them by that's just a fairly horrific race. There's lots of countries they could have contacted. They didn't have to contact Hitler.
How many different races are you coming across in this? How many different species or whatever you want to call them, types of aliens?
For us, there's either 6 or 7 that we consider legit. There are the Greys, the reptilian amphibians, the human type aliens, the tall whites, the little short browns, and the light beings. That's what we consider the 6 legitimate type that there's actually evidence for. When people tell me, like Greer told me one day at a conference, 56 types, I said, where the hell did you get that figure from? Well, it comes from the NASA guy. I said, but where did he get that from? I said, let's review how many spacecraft types there are, because there's not very many. If you ever even look at a chart where there's like 60 or 70 craft, you'll notice they almost always look the same. They're round.
In spacecraft, I don't know if you can answer this, but I've always wondered this. We see different types of spacecraft. Mm-hmm. Are they like all from the same race? Like you have different versions of a Ford, you got a Lincoln and a Taurus and stuff like that, or are they from different races?
Well, to help you out with that, the regular everyday saucer belongs to the Greys. They have 3 types or 4 types of the saucers, which range in size. They have like a scout craft, a probe craft, what I would consider a more advanced, looking like it was more military designed. Mm-hmm. And then they have one of their motherships. This was a weird one, and this took a while to figure out. We found this out in California, thanks to a bunch of witnesses out there. A lot of people see these rectangular craft.
Yeah, those are really big. You hear them all.
Yeah, they're huge. Yeah, they're huge. Well, sometimes they'll have like 3 bumps on top and 1 bump on the bottom. Sometimes they'll have 5 bumps on top and 2 bumps on the bottom. Sometimes there'll be 3 bumps on the bottom and 2 bumps on top. Well, we couldn't figure out what it was. Well, a lady was out there videotaping one day, and guess what it is? The saucers actually land and merge into the ship and become part of the ship. It's like the skin itself melds to the ship.
Oh, wow.
And it makes a hump. Where the top of the saucer is, makes a hump. So depending on how many saucers are docked to the craft is how many humps appears on the craft. See, because we kept thinking they were different craft. It's actually one type of craft with just different amounts of saucers on board.
Wow.
That was one of the weirdest things to find out, but we know that belongs to the Greys. We know that the humans fly small triangles and big triangles. Those big, huge triangles, they say that are 4, 5, 6 miles across, those belong to the human type aliens. They're big, huge, monstrous thing. Most people describe them like 16 aircraft carriers long and 5 aircraft carriers tall and 5 or 16 aircraft carriers wide. They're huge. I mean, 2, 3, 4 miles. They're huge ass craft. And then and they have a small triangle they use. They also have a teardrop and an egg drop shaped craft they use like probes. And then the reptilians have what we call an elongated saucer. It's like somebody took a saucer and grabbed it on two sides and stretched it out.
Mm-hmm.
What's funny about it is both your small and large craft look like that. They have small, like 3 or 4 small versions of it, and they have one huge version of it that's several miles across. It's a mothership too, and then there's a lot of different type probe and orb ships, but basically, that's pretty much all the big ships anybody describes as those 3 types. And in the small ships, the scout ships are all about 5 types, and then there's about probably 50 types of probe ships. But it lets you know that there's only really a few races visiting the planet. And from what we understand about the light beings, they don't need any physical technology. They can move through space and time just like anything. They don't have to actually have a technology to move. They can create with thought. So they're and our little limited intellect, we'd have to think of them as gods, but in reality, they are extraterrestrials. They actually say that they created the Greys as a police force for this galaxy.
Wow,
They
that's
said,
cool.
they said they came here from another galaxy, and the galaxy was in a big, huge fight. The reptilian humans, all of them. There was a big, huge fight, and the light beings came and basically created the Greys to help bring peace to the known galaxy. And there's a lot of contactees that talk about the councils and the council domes and the council cities. And here's a weird one for you. We've got like 300 contactees that have been to the council city. They all describe the world the same way. It's a big, huge world, 4 or 5 times the size of Earth, with no physical land on it at all. It's all water. The only thing that you see is one huge city. They said the city's about the size of might be the size of a moon, like the size of our moon. And it just floats around the planet. That's all it does. It moves around on the planet. And it's supposed to be where the council resides. They said the reason it's so big is because every race has its own little like building for its own representation.
Wow.
And now here's what's interesting. The council chamber itself, if you've ever seen one of the Star Wars movies, I think it was the 3rd one, or the 2nd one, whichever one where Yoda goes after the Emperor, they describe that council room a lot like that, where the chairs go up the wall and they can move and stuff. And at the very top of it, there's a dome, like a bubble that dips down into it. And in that bubble, it's completely full with water. And they actually say that's where all the amphibian races are actually at. And then underneath that, there's a table that goes across where the Council of 13 sits. Or I'm sorry, the Council of 15 sits. With the light beings being sitting in the middle and the other races going. By the way, there are no human representation there. I mean, humans like us. We're not nowhere near that advanced yet to get anywhere near. I mean, they bring us there and they let us see it and they let us understand what's going on, and they even let you participate to an extent. But we're not really represented. We're not even, in the grand scheme of things, I think they barely consider us to be sentient.
Yeah.
We're just so far down the food chain, it's just where we are.
And these are stories you're hearing from multiple people that don't know each other, and I mean they're giving you the same descriptions and the same thing.
A lot of these stories come with artwork. They send me artwork along with it. Wow. Well, it's like the alphabet. A lot of contactees have alphabets. Everybody originally thought these were the alien alphabets, and they may be based on alien alphabets, but no contactee has the same alphabet, not one.
Huh, that's amazing.
They may share some same or symbols sometimes, but no 2 contactees have the same alphabet. So we posed the question to the, actually I think we said the reptilians to find out, or it might have been the Greys, to see why. The answer was basically, this is so that each contactee can keep what they want to keep secret. So they can keep a journal and a log without anybody being able to read it but them. And let me tell you, I can't tell you how many contactees keep these journals. Mostly females for some reason, but a lot of them keep them. I mean, a lot of them. And it's funny, they will send me their journal, and they will send me a key with it so that I can decipher what the hell I'm reading. I always tell them, read it to me and send me an audio tape so I can listen to it while I'm driving. It's just easier on me that way.
That's absolutely amazing. I never realized there was this much. How many cases do you get? I mean, how common is this?
Well, the organization's investigated more than 15,000 cases. Probably more than that. The 15,000 number's been around for about 8 or 9 years now. What it comes down to, like my Texas state director, he will probably talk to 100, 150 contactees this year. Okay, easy. He's probably himself in the last 10 years investigated more than 1,000 cases. Well, when you start timesing that, how many directors we got, and then myself, I mean, when I was with MUFON about 2 decades ago, we did a a 5,000 case study. We found 5,000 contactee cases worldwide and went through and did a comparison study on what we can find. That was actually the basis for the abduction criteria. Since then, I.C.A.R. has added that many more cases. But like this week alone, I had 14 people write to me.
Wow.
So that's just to me. That's not to anybody else in the organization. And the more public we go, the more people we get. But then, we run stuff like the blood type study, which a lot of people are interested in, and we have the reptilian, the gray, the human questionnaires, which are all ongoing projects. Mm-hmm. We have the job thing. We keep about 7 or 8 questionnaires going at all times. And this, John, is to help us define contactees that don't know their contactees. We're using this so that we can figure out who the hell is what, like the blood type study. I don't know how many people around the world know this, but Rh negative just showed up about 25 or 35,000 years ago. Before that, there was no Rh negative on the planet. It was all Rh positive. And Rh, the acronym Rh is from the rhesus monkey. That's all it means. Rh plus means that you share 2% of your original DNA with a rhesus monkey. Mm-hmm. Rh negative doesn't, by the way. They have no relation to the rhesus monkey at all. Well, for a long time, scientists couldn't even figure out how this happened because a mother that's positive with a father that's negative can't have children. It will kill the child. They had to come up with the antigenogen G gene. Damn. Antigenogen D gene. It's a vaccination they used to give you so that you could have children. Uh-huh. That's the whole reason why for so many years people had to get blood tests before they got married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, now that's stopped now. For some reason, they said either through vaccinations or through natural selection, our bodies have changed on its own. But for a long time, they couldn't. That's what they had to do. You had to go get a blood test, and either you couldn't get married or you had to get the shot, and that's how you would have a child. Because they just didn't get along. So that's kind of weird to start off with. Well, Rh negative is only 15% of the world's population. That's all it is. O negative is only 7% of the world's population, but it's the only it's the purest blood ever to exist on the planet and the only universal donor. In other words, anybody on the planet can take O negative blood. Even people with rare AB negative can still take O negative, but O negative can only take O negative. They can't take any other blood but O negative. So here's something useful out of nowhere. Then we needed this too. 25,000 years ago when this came around and then, bred up until recent times, we needed this. This is the reason why, we saved so many people in World War II, in Vietnam, Korea, and all the other wars because Rh negative can be pumped into the field and anybody can use it and be saved.
That's fascinating.
So they don't have to have your blood type on stock as long as they have that O negative. And they can say, and it saved many, many, many lives because of it. So you have that. Well, when we started doing the poll on contactees, which is, I think about 5,000 contactees have taken this poll and about 3,000 everyday people have taken this poll, we learned something interesting. The overall majority of contactees, like 68% of them, turned out to be Rh negative. So around 30% of them are Rh positive, around 70% of them are Rh negative. Well, that doesn't congeal with the planet because 85% of everybody is Rh positive and only 15% of the world is Rh negative. So it shows the aliens have a particular interest in Rh negative. Not exclusively, but particularly interest in Rh negative. And Rh negative people have different types of personalities than Rh positive. They're more open-minded. They're usually more world-orientated. They're more one government orientated. They have a much different look overall of the planet than Rh positive people do. And coincidence? I have no idea, but it's one of those things that we are looking into. Also, Rh negative is a mutation. Well, come to find out that out of the 70% of the people, the contactees that have Rh negative, 60% of those people turned out to be O negative. So not only do they have a particular interest in Rh negative, they have a bigger particular interest in O negative. And then on top of that, green eyes are a mutation that just mutated somewhere about 20 or 30,000 years ago, popped up out of nowhere. Before that, there was only brown and blue, and everybody says that they're made, simply because, brown-eyed people marry green-eyed, blue-eyed people, they have green eyes. Okay. Well, how come for 2 million years before that they didn't have them? Why wasn't it mutating them? What triggered the mutation? And how come 60% of all contactees have green eyes? Do you know almost everybody that's Rh negative is green eyed?
That's
It's like
amazing.
88%. Yeah, and these are doctors' facts, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You can go look this up for your site on the blood testing. Almost 88% of all Rh negative are green eyed. It's a weird coincidence. And then there's some other really weird coincidences. Come to find out that South America and Central America are 99.9% O. Now, if you believe in the out of Africa theory, then you should see a nice even blood mixture across the planet, not a whole continent that's 99% O.
Right. That means they're just there by themselves and never been with anybody.
Well, the three doctors that we originally started working with this on, because I was a lot about this I didn't understand, so I was contacting these different doctors. When I sent him this information, he's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I said, "Well, this is what it says. This is what those 2 studies said that y'all did." So he went back and checked it. He's like, "Whoa, wait a minute here." He said, "So if we were born out of Africa, meaning that mom had A and dad had B, then we would have A and B and AB, and we wouldn't have O. Okay, there would be no need for it. And eventually we might have had A, B negative and A negative, but still it would have been any O." So what he thinks really happened is, he thinks a group started in Africa probably with A blood type. Another group started maybe in Europe somewhere with B blood type, and another group started in South America with O. Somewhere along the line, maybe when the land bridge was up on the Bering Straits, they all met together, and that's what created the healthy population that's alive today, because genetic studies proved one thing for sure. Two parents cannot create a healthy population of 7 billion. The very minimum you would have had to start off with is 3,600 to create a population of actually 6 billion. For 7 billion would have had to be closer to about 5,000. So there was no way that 5,000 people just appeared on the African savannah and survived. It's an impossibility. The lions, the tigers, and the apes would have killed them. So what they really think happened is that they think a group started in Africa, met with a group in Europe, and they bred together, and that's what created the AB. Those groups eventually met with the O people as they were migrating this way, and that's and then they got together, and that's why we have a healthy population today, because we had 3 different blood types with 3 different genomes that bred together that created the population that lives on the planet today. And because of this, I.C.A.R is getting an honorable mention and a peer review that's being done, because the 3 scientists that we were dealing with this are actually going to present this in a peer review study this year. And we will get partial credit for finding the data out for them. But they're saying it's going to rewrite evolution on the planet.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing.
But what I find more funny about this than that is, isn't it possible that the human aliens are A, the reptilians are B, and the grays are O?
Yeah,
since they all interbred with us?
Yeah, that could very well be too.
So, you got to kind of stop and go, okay, there's a lot more going on here than anybody realized. That's why I give, some of the shows a hard time on TV. I'm saying that's why I said, a lot of these TV shows are simply not doing their homework. They're missing too much of this good data. Well, here's another one for you. Egyptian emperors had long heads. A lot of the emperors had this weird, they said it was a disease that made them have this long head. Yeah. Well, a true human alien has a long head. See, they don't look just like us. Their faces are kind of like ours, but they have a different color eye, different kind of pupil, and their heads are longer than ours. I mean, the basic shape of their face is the same as ours, except it's bigger. Mm-hmm. But when you look at their head, if you're standing sideways, you'll notice their head goes back about a foot, whereas ours goes back, 4 or 5 inches.
Right.
Well, that's what the Egyptians had, and the Egyptians said that's who was messing with them in their text until the Greys came along 2,000 years later. They said that was the dominance in their text. Well, when you get over to South America, the Nazcans were boarding their kid to make their children look like their gods. Well, originally we thought that was Gray's head because everybody said they had a great big head. But Grays do have a great big head, but it kind of goes upward and back. It doesn't just go longwards back. Well, the Nazcan children's heads look like the Egyptian pharaohs' heads.
Right.
They were narrow and long, which suggests that the human type aliens were intervening with the Nazcans. See, we're learning this now. Now that we have some somewhat fact data to go on these different aliens, we can start to look around the world and see who was doing what and when. Because now we actually, have some data to go backwards and look and say, okay, well, this was reptilian, this was human, this was gray. And now we know with the grays, you don't see a gray until about 3,500 years ago when it appears on a hieroglyph in an Egyptian tomb. And then after that, you start hearing different races talk about it, but not until then. So it looks like the humans and reptilians were here quite a bit longer than the grays were. The grays seem to show up later on and then get involved. But now it seems like all three of them are involved, and they all got their damn DNA in our society, and it's weird. And something for the listeners to think about. When you're breeding animals, you'll breed the best two animals together to get the even greater animal. Eventually, you'll create an animal that surpasses its original genome. So here you now have a society that has part gray in it, part reptilian, and part human that are keep interbreeding back with each other. Like, the reptilian child may breed with another reptilian child and create a better reptilian child. That child may marry a gray child and have children. That child may marry a human child and have a child, and it may go all the way back and marry a reptilian child to have a child. They're creating a new species on the planet. But more importantly, eventually they will surpass their masters, and it might be why the aliens are so damn interested in us. And it might be why they want to keep such an eye on us, because it may take us 1 billion years to achieve this, but we may surpass them one day. We may become the new light beings in 1 billion years from now. So wouldn't you want to know that race was friends with you or favorable to you?
Yes.
Because, in the Greys evolution, a lot of science and a lot of people think the Greys are at the peak of their evolution. They're at the pinnacle of their evolution. And that's as far as they're going to evolve, which may be true, may not be true. We don't know. But by them entering their DNA with us and the reptilians and the other humans, it may give us that spark that pushes us beyond them. And humans are quick. I mean, we're dumb, but we're smart at the same time. We learn things quick. We implement them quick. We've changed the planet majorly in just 100 years. For the good or bad, we have done it. So, all of this is out there, and we just need to remember, that there's more going on than we realize. There's way more data than most people realize, and we just need to be vigilant.
All the contactees you've dealt with, Joe, has there ever been any sort of physical evidence? Has anybody ever had anything?
Well, you got the implant evidence, that Darrell Sims and Dr. Lear and a few other people have worked on. So that's physical, tangible evidence. We've seen implants, like there's been a couple of these implants there. They basically look like little stainless steel BBs.
Right.
Problem is the mineral's not from Earth. Some of them haven't even been identified. They don't know what the mineral is. Some of it is definitely minerals found in meteorites, but none of it is native to Earth. So first off, how did it get in the person's body? And secondly, where did it come from?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not from Earth, and how did it get in? Because somebody say, well, what? It's a meteorite. That's how it got him. What, the meteorite hit the person, didn't kill him? Come on.
Exactly.
These things, even a micrometeorite hit you is going to split you in half. So I'm thinking, oh, no, that's not making sense. And they're just little stainless steel. I mean, that's what I call them, little stainless steel pellets. But still, they defy explanation.
But didn't they have a membrane on them too? That I think it was Dr. Lear that says he could barely cut through this thing.
Yeah, actually, they use a membrane that's formed from your own chemistry, so that the body doesn't reject it, and then the implant is put inside of it. At least some of the implants are put inside of it. That way, the body doesn't reject the implant. As far as it's concerned, it's like a little tumor in your body that's not bad for you. It just ignores it because it's your own.
There's really no way to explain that other than this. I mean, their science has got no way to explain that away, do they?
No, they don't. They have no way to explain that away. Just like that European doctor was cutting in that lady because she had something in her arm, and he was going to remove it, and the damn thing moved and went up her arm.
Huh.
So he went up there and it moved again. So then he tied her arm off to try to stop it, and then it got way down by her heart, so they left it alone.
Well, I hadn't heard of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, that's not even the first one. There's been a couple of implants that have been tried to been taken that move. They seem to be intelligent or under intelligent control.
Wow.
Lear talks about one too. He's got one he talks about. It just kind of kept trying to snake off. You run into that kind of stuff. But in all fairness, most contactees don't have implants. Usually when you do find an implant, it's like a V-chip, and it's government implant. It's like a GPS, and basically what it is, it's GPS and all your medical records on a little bitty tiny chip.
Mm-hmm.
And most Americans now are familiar with the V-chip. They wouldn't have been a decade ago, but most people are now, because now you can put them in your dogs. Pretty soon there's going to be a bill in Congress where you have to put them in your kid if they're under 18.
Yeah, that's a bunch of crap.
Yeah, I'm so torn with that too, John, because part of me says, okay, it's a good idea. Put chips in your children, and then you'll always know where your kid is. You can just go on there'll be an app for your phone. You type in GPS, there's your son,
That's
your
going
daughter,
too
wherever she is.
far.
So that's a good thing for young kids and small kids and stuff like that. Okay, the problem for me is if they start chipping these kids young, because they're never going to get it into adults because adults just ain't going to go for it. If they start chipping them young, a lot of the kids when they become 18, 19, 20 are not going to have them removed. So eventually, after a couple of generations, everybody will be chipped and everybody will have a chip because they won't remove them. Because the way the government worded is, you keep the chip till you're 17, and at 17 you can have the chip removed. But a lot of people won't. A lot of people will keep it, and there are some big advantages to it because, if somebody's kidnapped, right where they are at the moment, and I mean there are big advantages to it. But the government always knows where you are.
There are advantages, but I don't know. I think that's just invading your privacy just way too much. But real quick here, I know you're getting tired there too.
Oh, that's okay.
You were talking about Barney and Betty Hill, that you had some all new information on that. You want to hit on that?
I'm glad you brought that up. This thing is in itself. I've been talking about the Hills for a while, and I know it aggravates a lot of people in the field. Fortunately for me, a lot of people in the field have now picked up on my theory of the Hills and actually endorse it. But in the beginning, it was kind of hard. Make a long story short, I had been hearing about the Hills for a long time, and I do abduction research. So finally, one of my investigators said, "Joe, why don't we just do a full-out, blown-out investigation on the Hills?" Well, he knew a guy who had all of Betty and Barney Hill's original regression tapes, which I still have, by the way. I got copies of them and put them in my computer, and we started listening. And as I was listening, I was hearing distinctively different things. Like there was 3 sets of memories. There's the actual memory of them being awake and conscious. There's what they remember in their dreams, and there's what they remember in their hypnosis. Well, they weren't congealing. If what really happened, the 3 sets of memories should be fairly close together. But they weren't. So then I started doing a lot more research, and I found out that in Canada, the day before the Hills were abducted in the United States, they lost a whole day. They drove into town and they checked into a hotel. Okay. Now, you know as well as I do, when you check into a hotel, you've got to sign to check in. So they check in, they check out, they have breakfast. They do not remember the name of the hotel that they checked into. They do not remember seeing the sign when they checked out. They said they went across the street and had breakfast. They do not remember what they had for breakfast or what the name of the place they had breakfast for. So anyway, they were getting ready to leave after that. When they got ready to leave, they decided they were going to ask this gentleman for directions. One describes him as an Irish guy, big, tall, red-headed Irish guy. The other one describes him as a black cop.
A little different there.
This is classic 1960s alien abduction. Missing time, things don't look right, cover memories, the whole 9 yards. I mean, this is classic alien abduction. So I'm like, well, why doesn't anybody ever talk about what happened to him in Canada? So I listened to everything they had to say about that, and I listened to them in other interviews, and it really does sound like classic alien abduction. So I'm listening to what happens in Connecticut, or is it Connecticut, wherever it is. So they're driving downhill, they see this thing in the sky, and all of a sudden they get pulled over. 4 guys walk up to the 4 men, not aliens. They describe them as men, military men, walk up to the car and remove them from the car and walk them to the spaceship and then walk them up the stairs into the craft. Okay, first off, that was the very first time I'd ever heard of anybody being taken in a craft like that, ever, to date. So I found that interesting. Well, every interview you ever hear Barney in, whether it's under regression or it's regular memory or anything, he always says the same thing. They were dressed in black boots, black pants, black shirts, and black duck-billed caps. This is typical Black Ops operation. DU, whatever you call them, DEA, whatever, just straight out Black Ops. That's how they dress. They still dress that way today. So I found that very suspicious. Then they start talking about the hair, blood, and skin samples they've taken. She said they used a razor scalpel to take skin samples and skin flake. They used a needle to take blood. They took other kind of samples, other fluid samples, and they used conventional technologies. She talks about pull-out drawers on board a spacecraft. No, I'm not thinking you got pull-out drawers on board a spacecraft because they might well fly open. roll down maps. Okay, things like this, books that open and close, paper books with hard backs. This is all typical 1960s terrestrial technology. None of this would be considered extraterrestrial technology.
True.
So the more you listen to it, the more you're thinking, well, wait a minute, something else is here. Then when she really starts describing the procedures, and he describes the procedures, it really sounds like CDC, control series, where they come in to check for contaminants. That's what it sounds like. So what it sounds like really happened was the Hills were abducted in Canada. When they got back to the U.S., the U.S. already knew they had been taken. They flagged them on a nice section of the road. They picked them up and they ran. The Hills may have been the first military abduction, or at least the first recorded military abduction. And more importantly than that, and more suspiciously than that, Barney was quite good friends with a lot of Air Force people. One even lived in his house. Okay, and he was friends with several key people. One was a colonel in the Air Force, a high-ranking, worked in special services for the Air Force, black ops basically. Best friends with Barney. Also, Barney had mental problems his whole life, which is typical for a contactee, being in and out of, having mental problems. Mm-hmm. He was also the one that got to meet the President of the United States. He's the one that moved the Air Force guys in. He's the one that the Air Force guys were interested in. So really, more so than even that, the fact that it was a mill lab, I really think Barney was the abductee. Betty was the ridey. Right. A lot of times in abductions, there'll be one that's abducted and one that's just there. And that's really what it sounds like. It really sounds like that's what was going on.
Oh, so sometimes they'll just take one person?
Well, like in a husband and wife, a lot of times the wife's the contactee. They'll bring the husband along sometimes, but they're not actually the contactee.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of times they'll just zap them or sit them there and let them kind of walk around and mill around like in a daze or something, which is, by the way, what Betty describes most of the time. Mm-hmm. And she may have been a contactee, but bottom line is what happened in the United States, from both of their accounts, sounds like a military abduction. It sounds like military equipment, military technology, and more importantly, it sounds like period technology of the time. And then she talks about one thing, it sounds like an epidural. Mm-hmm. Well, they had them back then, they just weren't in regular doctors. Actually, they had quite a few things back then that didn't make regular hospitals for almost a decade later, but they did. Most people didn't know we had vacuum pumps to remove blood back then, or field lasers. They were big, don't mind me, but they were big, but we had them. So a lot of this stuff is just, she describes as terrestrial technology. And so it didn't make any sense to me because, when the Greys take you, or any of the other races take you, the Greys technology is far more advanced than that. I mean, like I told you, the tables mauled to you. She's talking about stainless steel top tables. Swinging double doors. I've never heard of any of this in an extraterrestrial spacecraft before. It wouldn't even make sense. And then there's the star map. I know Stan Friedman thinks it's the greatest thing ever, but there's no basis for anything on the star map. Where did she get the point of reference from? She says it herself. They showed her stars on a map. Mm-hmm. Okay. Matter of fact, she says a pull-down map off the wall. So where was the point of reference? How did you know where you were on that map? So how could you ever draw a coherent map again if you didn't know the point of reference? Was it their home world? Was it our home world? Was it something in between? There is no point of reference. Without a point of reference, the map is useless. They're trying to say that I'll tell you what, I can come right now to anybody who wants to try this. I can get a piece of paper and make 7 or 8 dots on it, right? Just random dots, and put it to the night sky, and I will eventually find a match for those dots because there's that many dots in our sky. So, doing it that way, you're going to find something. But legitimately, there is no point of reference. So if you don't know where the alien's home world is, how in the hell are you going to know where the map originates from?
Yes.
Or what the point of reference star is. So the map is really useless. And I've challenged Stanton on that, which, by the way, he gets really mad about. But I've challenged him on that many times because there is no real way that you can prove this map as being legit. And frankly, anybody can make a star map. So you got to take it for what it is. And when you get right down to the interview and the types of technology they talk about conventional technology.
They really do. I'd never thought of that before you said that. But now, from what I know from this already, listening, You're absolutely right. I mean, 100% right.
Yeah.
And didn't she have a book too? Wasn't that the one where she wanted to take a book and they said she could, but then she couldn't at the end or something?
Yeah, Dad, she had to give it back.
Yeah, why would they have a book?
Yeah, they had a regular book too, nothing special, just an everyday book. Now, that's a big parallel. That means some other race decided to put their stuff down in a paperback bound book.
Yeah, and what are the odds of that?
Then yeah, what are the odds of that? Especially a race that can travel across time and space. You'd think there'd be something more like today. We have pads. You can bet your ass our astronauts will have pads on board. They're not going to have books. They may have notebooks for handwriting, but probably not. They're going to probably have pads. They're going to probably have their little iPad up on that thing with them where they can float around, tap on it, write on it, and do whatever. Because we're moving away from paper, because we don't want to kill trees anymore. So we're moving away from paper. So you got to think races that are very advanced, especially telepathic races, we're probably not using that type of technology. It sounds like, a military book. And even some of the stuff she describes about the book sounds military.
Yeah. Like I said, that book, I never thought that book made any sense when I was thinking about that.
And then, everybody always tells me, well, she describes an extraterrestrial. Well, yeah, she does, but it's because it's an overlay of memories. She's confusing the memories from Canada, where she was actually abducted, with the memories of what happened in the military case. And it made total sense to me once I realized that. Once I realized they were overlaying memories, I knew exactly what had happened. They were taken in Canada, and they were taken in the United States by the military, and the two sets of it's two distinctively different memories that are bleeding over each other. And you can see that in the regression. You can actually see it. So, for me, it was a much different case. And in all fairness, I don't want to hate on the investigators, because no one knew about military abductions back then. And no one would even have thought back then that the government would even do something like that. But now we know better than that. We know the government does stuff like that. So it made much more sense. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me today is why they fight it so hard. Why would Kathleen Maldron or Stan Friedman fight this so hard? Because it is a much more plausible explanation for what went on. It really takes all of the memories into account. It takes all of their own testimonies into account. And it does show a much more plausible, much more agreeable theory to the research data we know today.
It actually really does.
So I'm always kind of floored why they fight me so hard on it. And Kathleen Maldron did admit to the fact, which I thought was funny. She told Melinda Leslie that, after that one time they had been military abducted. Yeah, all right, well, you goofball. If you believe that they were abducted in Canada, why didn't you think what happened the next day was military? Mm-hmm. So she even contradicts herself. I really think in her case it has more to do with I had already written a book and I'm stuck with it. And more importantly than that, there are contradictions in the books that Betty and Barney originally wrote and the one Kathleen Maldron wrote. There's several. Matter of fact, on my website somewhere is a list of them. We sent it to her. We made a whole list of everything we found that was wrong and sent it to Kathleen Maldron and gave her a chance to try to explain it. Why there was so many differences between the two books. I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, they said this happened. Now you're saying this happened. So they actually have even changed the story somewhat to try to fit more modern era. That makes no sense at all. And the whole thing didn't make any sense to me, what they were doing. I was like, damn. So I really think in this case it came down to I need to sell some books, and that's what it really came down to. Yeah. I don't think it came down to the truth of what was really going on. And like I told her, I said, you should write a book about this. It would be a much bigger seller. I said, come on, these poor people were alien abducted, messed with the military their whole life. I mean, they live right there by the Air Force Base. He had all kind of Air Force friends. And what was weird about it is he had high-ranking Air Force friends. Mm-hmm. Remember, he was supposed to be a postman. Okay? But yet he got to mingle with presidents. He knew high-ranking military officials. Why is that?
Yeah, it was kind of
sounds like somebody knew he was an abductee. Somebody close to him knew he was an abductee, and they were watching him. And that's why they were watching him. They were waiting for a chance to military abduct him, and they finally got him. I think that's why the Air Force person was living with him, so that they would know when they were coming and going.
Just as keepers, so they knew exactly what was going on.
So they knew exactly what was going on. And I find it weird that an Air Force guy leaked the story. So the whole thing just stinks. And when something stinks that bad, there's usually a pile laying around, So personally, I never understood why they fought me so hard on it. Like I told you, when I told George Norrie about it, he was like, you'll never change my mind. And of course, he has a different opinion about the case now. And so do a lot of researchers in the field.
Yeah, actually, you just changed my mind. I mean, it's logical. It fits perfectly.
Yeah, and I just, and I always told everybody, well, y'all can fight me on this. I said, but eventually this will be the accepted theory for the hills. I said, and I was being real nice to Kathleen. I said, Kathleen, you should really think about it. I said, because one day it will take over the story you're saying. I said, because it's more plausible. It incorporates everything the hill says, and what you says just don't. And it's like the dress thing. Now they try to tell me about evidence on the dress. Okay. First off, they threw this dress in the garbage can. Okay. Then they went and took it out of the garbage can and put it in a closet for, I don't know, 25 years. Mm-hmm. And then they did an analysis on it. Okay.
Okay.
Give me a break. I mean, what do you want me to do with that analysis? It's totally and utterly useless. It's sorry about the phone there, guys.
That's
apparently
okay.
Trying to find us. But it is. It's totally and utterly useless. I mean, I don't know what you're going to do with that. So, and I'm very hard on this because we do talk about a subject that is very, very out there to start off with. And I do prefer to stick as much to real evidence as I can. I don't like hypotheses. I don't like beating around the bush. That's why we do comparison studies, because as a researcher, I need real evidence. I can accept anything, but I can't go to the general public and say I want you to believe, because I don't believe in the believe world, in the word.
Correct.
Believe to me means you worship God. That's a belief system. ET is not a belief system. You either know the suckers are on the planet or you don't. You've either seen enough evidence to let you know they're really here, or you haven't. Or you've seen one or you haven't. But there's no real in between. It drives me crazy when people say, I believe in ET. I'm like, next thing you'll be preaching to him.
There you go. That's absolutely fascinating, Joe. I mean, you covered a lot of stuff here I had no idea about.
Well, we try to keep a wide range of stuff on topic. Like I was telling you earlier, I'm working with Larry and Peter, and I can't wait to send all this data I got for Peter over, all this voice stress analysis. By the way, anyone listening, I did voice stress analysis on Larry Warren. He passed. I just thought I'd throw that out there. It doesn't mean exactly what happened, but it does mean something happened. And that is something else we're working on right now, is what may have happened. I do think there might have been some Millab stuff in Larry Warren, because there was sodium amythol found, which is a drug used to, it's a drug they use when they do hypnosis to change people's memories, is what it's used for.
So that's to plant a story or a cover story in your head.
Yeah, sodium, I don't want people to get confused, because sodium pentothal is to help retrieve memories. Sodium amythol is to help block memories. Okay. And these were found in blood, and they're not the only people we found this in. Other mill labs have had sodium amythol, so we know it's one of the ways the government does block memories. They use sodium amythol. One of the ways, by the way.
So the government will do this, and they do it to people they know that have actually been contactees, and they experiment on them, and then they put memories back on their heads and put them back.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you something else I find interesting. From time to time, the Greys or the reptilian, the humans, will show up. And we've heard this a lot. Sometimes they will just come hang out and watch what's going on. They'll come hang out with the military people who watch they don't actually work with them, but they'll be watching. Occasionally, contactees from all three races have told me, if they're doing something that is not comfortable for the contactee, or the alien feels is not what they should be doing, they will actually remove them, take them from the government, and put them back home.
Wow.
The first time I heard that, I'm like, yeah, there's some stupid sci-fi stuff. Y'all smoking crack, get over this. And really, I'm like that on a lot of stuff. I'm like, get out of here. I'm hard. You got to prove stuff to me. I'm really hardcore about this. And after enough cases, I realized, occasionally they do come in and take people. There's a case in Gulf Breeze. There was 100 and something people in this one case. All of them with recall, by the way. There was a group of, make a long story short, they took them to a base underneath Eglin Air Force Base. It was about 175 people. There was this one room with this big round silver stirrup looking thing. It was a big round thing, and it had 10 or 12 chairs, and each chair was like a stirrup. And each chair had a woman in it, in the stirrups, and they had this big, tall, skinny, red-headed doctor walking around. Everybody thinks he's a hybrid, by the way. He's like 6'7", 6'8". He's weird looking. His eyes look kind of strange. And I cannot tell you how many contactees have described this doctor to me. The only major difference you ever hear is his hair color is slightly different from time to time. But the overall description is identically the same. Well, sometimes he'll be doing things to contactees that the aliens are not happy with, and they will come in and take them. And in this case, all 175 people described this one guy almost identically.
What are the odds of that?
Yeah, not only that, they described the tables, some of the other stuff that was seen in the building. And when you're there, you definitely get a sense this is a terrestrial. Even though graves were seen, you definitely get a sense that this is a terrestrial building. Cinder block walls, swinging plastic doors, floors, concrete floors. It just sounds like a government facility, classic government facility, really. When people are describing it, they all describe it the same way. And it was such a weird event because there were so many people that reported they were on the beach when it happened. And so many people had reported what had happened on the beach that we had to look into the case, and that's what we found. And it's a very, very strange scenario on how that works. But they do get involved, and they don't like them screwing around but so far. And then they say, okay, that's enough, stop. I guess for two reasons. One, I don't think they actually want them hurting the contactees. And two, I don't think they want the government getting certain information. I honestly don't think the government knows much more than any long-term researcher with the status that we're doing.
All right.
Because there's just no need for the government to know. Unless they're being taken, there's no need for them to know. E.T., I have to say this bluntly, E.T. does not seem to care about anybody else on the planet but the contactees. They seem to be very nonchalant about it, like, they're just humans, screw them. Yeah. And to drive this home, it's rare we get scenarios that are the same. We get data that's the same, like everyday experiment. Let me put it in perspective, like the milking machine. A lot of guys will describe the milking machine. Mm-hmm. This is basically sperm removal is what this is. They put you down on the table, they strap this thing to you, and, blah, blah, blah goes on.
Right.
Lots of guys describe this, and they describe the machine identically, too, which is a cool thing because we know it's real then, because we talk about the milking machine, but we never say what it looks like. Mm-hmm. So a lot of guys, when they describe it the same way. They're describing this identically the same way, and you hear this in other areas. Where was I going now? I lost my train of thought. Getting old is a bitch, y'all. That's all I got to say. No, there was a reason I was saying it because it was something I wanted to drive home to y'all. Now it just went right out of my head. If I remember, I'll bring it back. But damn,
that's okay.
See, y'all, take your vitamins, take your pills, do whatever you got to do. Keep your brain going the way it should be going. Oh, no, it's important, too. And it's going to make me crazy now. It's going to make me totally crazy. I'll probably hear the archive, and then I'll remember what it was. But it does. I mean, you get these comparison studies, and it's why we do comparison studies, is so that we do know some things are real and some things aren't. Oh, that's what it was. A lot of the outcomes, though, what people talk about alien agendas and outcomes and why they're here, rarely ever match. But there is this thing called the Holocaust stream. And about 25% of contactees have this fairly regularly. And they all describe it the same way, which is interesting, whether a city or not. But I'll use the one for Houston because it's always the one I use. And this is actually described by about 9 different people, okay? They say they're driving into Houston in a group with other people, by the way. They get to Houston and, the lights are working, but there's no people around, nobody on the street, nobody walking around, but there's no cars in the middle of the street. The cars are parked on the side or parked wherever they want to be. There's no fires, nothing rampaging, no people running around. And they're driving through the city, and every now and then they'll notice a broken window or something like that, but nothing of any real consequence, not like any blown up buildings or destroyed buildings. A lot of times they'll get out on the other side of town and they'll see like mass burials going on, like there's military out there burying people in mass. And occasionally they say they'll run across a person they almost describe like from one of them zombie movies, just insane like, but still. And so they describe this in great detail. Well, when you start asking contactees to ask aliens what's going on, it sounds like they're discussing a pandemic where like 70 or 80% of the planet just gets wiped. And from what I understand, it's in less than 7 days. Pretty much 80 to 85% of the planet bites the big one. And I think it's one of the reasons why researchers agree that it's 5 to 15% of the population, because anybody who's done this research realizes that that's what they're talking about 85% of the population.
And you have contactees saying this then?
Oh, yeah. They agree on it. That's what's so freaky scary about it. But when you listen to them talk, it doesn't sound like right now. There's things you hear like when they were describing these lights that I just now started noticing they just started using in Florida, which is weird. These lights were found nowhere. It's a type of stoplight they used. And I had never seen them anywhere. I've been all over the country. And all of a sudden, about a month ago, I was in Florida and I noticed they had just started using this type of stoplight. Now, the way they were talking, it was common and was all over the place. It's a stoplight that actually has displays information and stuff. And it can link to your car and display information to other things up the road. It's like a little mini computer. And you know, it's futuristic stuff. Well, contactees seem to have a sense of, they say there's around 9 or 10 billion people on the planet when this happens. We're at 7 billion now. 9 to 10 billion, that's at least 100, 200 years in our future.
Thank God.
And from the way they describe the cars and the other stuff, it does sound like you know, a couple of 100 years in the future. But they say the contactees are immune to it. It's not going to affect them at all. When this comes down, they're just going to be left, and you know, the ETs will come take the ones that they're going to take off world, and the ones that are going to leave here to colony, they will. But that's what they talk about, and they talk about it in great detail, and it just kind of freaks me out. But you know, when you hear in whatever city, like the girl from London, she was describing what happened with the way London looked, it sounded just like the description of Houston.
Wow.
You know, there doesn't seem to be any real difference there, other than, you know, occasionally they run in the military and occasionally they see a crazy person. But other than that, there doesn't seem to be anything else.
That's kind of creepy. My gosh, I never heard nothing like that either.
Yeah, and those kind of things, you know, and we don't get into them too much because we like to keep them. We like to keep them on the QT, just so we got reference points. But we have to put some of it out there so people that may be having these dreams can come forward and tell us about them. There's actually a great deal more detail than that. I mean, they get into some really, really detailed stuff with confrontations from the military to other things that they ran into to meeting points with the extraterrestrials. I mean, they get into some serious detail. And the funny part about that is, one girl's telling me she kept feeling drawn to this area on this mountain. And she said while she was in Houston, she met a group of people that seemed to have been working for the government. I mean, not for the government, but working for the ETs. They were out looking for contactees to help bring them back to this mountain. Well, I thought that was funny and kind of weird, but then I started asking other people, and a lot of other people said, oh, no, yeah, we have, that's where they're going to pick us up at.
Wow, that's just amazing.
So all of them are saying this, and so the mountain, and actually they all name the mountain.
Wow.
All of them. So the name is actually abduction criteria. It's not even that famous of a mountain. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you most people wouldn't even know this damn thing existed. I didn't until I looked it up. So it was kind of one of them things like, what the hell is this? So anytime I start getting stuff where we have, you know, 50, 80, 100, 200, 300 people seeing and feeling the same things, I have to take it as evidence. And somebody once told me, well, that's not real evidence. I said, well, in the United States, that's enough to get you to death penalty.
Yeah.
I said, multiple eyewitnesses of any robbery, any murder, you're dead. You're gone. You're done. You're over with. And think about this. Think about this is something else for my sightings friends out there, because we know there's a double standard in evidence these days. When somebody tells you there's no real evidence, then say, when they tell you that, ask them how come eyewitness testimony and videotape of someone being killed will get you the death penalty immediately, quickly, and swiftly. But yet if the same group of people videotaped a UFO taking somebody, oh, they're all crazy. Why is
true?
That? You know, you can have 50 people out there videotaping UFOs, they're all crazy. But if that same 50 people videotaped you out there robbing a convenience store, you're going to prison. Mm-hmm. That's a big-time double standard in evidence, So I have a rule. If it's acceptable for criminal evidence, it's acceptable for us. So
true, it should be.
And that's the way it should be. As far as physical, tangible evidence, there are some. You know, there's burned locations. Like my wife, this is a good source of evidence. We're in Gulf Breeze, Florida one night. My son was 3 at the time. And he's sitting on my wife's lap in the covers with the blanket over because it's kind of chilly out that night. It's kind of rainy, too. It was weird. It was like misting or something. All of a sudden, it quits missing. My son says, oh, my bug-eyed friends are coming. I'm like, what? I want to just smack him on the head when he said it, too. And all of a sudden, behind a sand dune just lights up. I mean, brilliant white. So I jump up and run up on top of the sand dune, and this kind of box-looking thing just comes floating over. It looked like a mini Borg ship or something, comes floating over this thing. And as it got over, it actually took a different shape. It looked more like a triangle. And then we watched it I ran back and sat down with my wife, and then we watched it as it came over the top of us. And my wife set my son down between us, and we watched it as it went out over the Gulf. Now, the whole time it quit raining while this thing was moving. Once it got back over the Gulf again, it started misting again. So I noticed we get in the car, my wife's like rubbing her arm. She's got diamond patterns burnt from her wrist to where her sleeves are on on both arms.
Wow.
We took her to the hospital. We thought it was something major. They didn't know what the hell. Hospital. We thought it was something major. They didn't know what the hell it was. They thought it was some kind of radiation burn or something. Next day, we took a picture of it. Next day, it was completely and utterly gone. It was like somebody took one of those them diamond grill things, heated it up, and just wrapped it around her arms.
Wow.
Because it was like that all the way around. It wasn't just on the surface, but it wasn't on her hand, and it wasn't on her face, and it wasn't on me or my son, and we were sitting next to her. So I'm assuming we got zapped that night and just don't remember it.
So you personally have experienced this too, then?
Oh, yeah. Down in Gulf Breeze, we've experienced some wild stuff. Well, that's what actually made me a believer was Gulf Breeze, because until then, I was still, even after 15 years of research and realizing that some of the research we were doing may have reflected in part of my life, I was still like, nah. I ain't believing it. Once you have that first experience, so it's kind of hard not to. And then we're real fortunate in the fact that we work with a lot of contactees and we work in a lot of hot spots. So sometimes we will put ourselves in positions where we know we're going to see something. You know, we know there's going to be an experience. And something more importantly, contactees become sensitive to where ET is a lot of times. That's why you'll hear contactees, I was driving down the highway, la, and I got this feeling, and I went off down this field, and bam, there they were, because they were sensitive. And the bad part about this is they get taken, but they're not supposed to be taken. They will be sensing someone else's abduction and be drawn to it. And they'll drive themselves over there. And, of course, once the aliens see you, they're like, well, look, you're not supposed to be here, zap.
Right.
And off you go. And that's actually quite common. We hear that a lot. We hear people all the time saying, I'm just minding my own business. Next thing I know, I'm in the middle of something. It's like, all the time, because people write to me all the time, most abductions happen at night. That's wrong. That's not even close to the truth. Probably 55 to 65% of all abductions probably happen on your way to work.
Oh, really?
Or on your way to the grocery store or something like that, when you're fully consciously awake and aware. I would probably say less than 15% happen while you're asleep in bed. For some reason, those were the ones that became popular, I guess, because it scared the bejesus out of people. But in reality, it's probably less than about 15% are actually taken while you're in bed. Even at night, they usually take you when you're awake. And I think there's reasons why for that. If you're an older guy with heart problems or something like that, and you wake up seeing a great, you'll probably have a heart attack and kick over right there.
Exactly.
So I think, it's just a rare thing they take you when you're asleep. And everybody says the same thing. Even when they come take you asleep, they wake you up ahead before they take you. It's like they want you to be conscious when this is going on. For whatever reason, they seem to want you to be conscious when this is going on. Because it would be easy for them to just knock you out, take you, leave you knocked out, put you back. You'd never even know.
If it's during the daytime, like if you're going somewhere, have people found out that they've been contacted because wherever they're going tells them they didn't show up for hours?
Nope. It's like I was telling you earlier, like the girl with the hot dog. You see, they loop the time. So there's not actually any missing time. Okay. They actually physically, let me rephrase this.
Okay, right, yeah, you had said
this is for the Greys, but this is for the Greys, not the reptilian humans do it a little differently, but with the Greys, they can take you, basically move you out of time and then drop you back, so you're not going to actually miss any work or anything. You're just going to think you drove to work like you normally did. It's just in that particular case, the hot dog stand was closed. And it's not the only time we've had that. One of my all-time favorite cases is two couples. This is such a freaky case. This happened 18 years ago, I think. There's a couple living in California, a couple living in New York. Okay. Both the wives get taken that night. Okay. So the guy in California, some woman, he hears the phone ringing, right? It's like, I guess it's like 4 a.m. because I think it was like, I think the girl in California said it was just becoming daylight. So it must have been like 4 a.m. California time. So he wakes up to this phone call of this woman just screaming. Well, he don't know it's his wife because he thinks his wife's sleeping next to him. Well, she's screaming at, where the hell are you? Where are you, baby? And come to find out, his wife was in bed in New York City with the man whose wife was in bed with the woman in Los Angeles.
Oh, my God, you're kidding.
The way it all starts out, the girl wakes up, right? She's in New York. I guess the sun came through the window or something. She wakes up, and she's noticing the room looks different. So she reaches over and starts pushing on her old man, what's up, baby? And when he wakes up and looks at her, they both freaked. You know, because it wasn't his wife, it wasn't her husband, so you know she freaked.
You're
So she's
serious, right?
Oh, I'm dead serious. This is a documented case.
Oh my God.
So they're just freaking. So she gets on the phone and she calls him. So he wakes up. When he wakes up, it wakes the other woman up, and of course she realizes now this ain't her husband. So she's freaking. So they're all freaking. So he gives her the phone, and she gets in the phone, and they're talking, and everybody's realizing now that somehow the two wives got swapped.
Wow.
The really weird part about it is both the wives were wearing similar clothes at night. I think they said it was like a T-shirt and drawers. It was very similar, like white. I mean, everything looked pretty much the same. And the women looked pretty close to each other. Not identical, mind you, but close. It looked like they simply put it back. So everybody said, oh, it was a hoax. They flew out there. We checked. There was no train tickets, no airfare tickets, no nothing. And this is the best part. Both of them had gone out that night, so they could verify that they were in their city. The lady and the guy in New York had dinner with their family and then went out dancing with some friends of theirs, and they didn't even get home till 2 a.m. All right, so, and this happened at, I guess, 7 o'clock their time, so that's like 5 hours. Not even that, about 5 hours. And they said when they got home, they were up for an hour or two. So she actually got taken around 4 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m. in the morning. Best we can tell, they just set them back in the wrong places.
And where was the other one at? One was in New York, and where was the other?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Wow.
Completely opposite sides of the thing. And then there's another one where, and this was even a goofier one. There's a woman in California, a woman in Japan. The woman in Japan wakes up one morning and she went to bed in a T-shirt and a pair of drawers. Oh, wait, I got it backwards. The girl in California went to bed in a T-shirt and a pair of drawers, and the girl in Japan went to bed in this little sexy-looking negligee thing.
Their clothes swapped, right?
So, yeah. Well, the reason they found out is the girl in Japan got up that morning. She's like, what the hell is this? I'm in a T-shirt and drawers. Well, the girl had her name written on her drawers, I guess because she had gone to camp or something. So her name and address was actually written on the drawer. So the woman contacted her from Japan and said, I have your clothes. So the lady was like, no. But she said, it's kind of funny. I woke up in this. So she took a picture of what she's wearing and sent it to the woman. And sure enough, they swapped clothes.
Wow.
Now, none of these women had ever met each other, knew each other, or anything. I mean, these are just every now and then ET screws up. I don't know why they do or how they even screwed up on that one, because, I mean, that's an American woman and Japanese woman wearing two distinctive outfits, but apparently somebody screwed up. So, you run into these kind of things that happen like that, but the swapping the people was, and it's not the first time we've heard about that. And then we've got cases where men and women were just dropped off on the side of the road. 100 miles from their house.
They don't remember where they got them. They just dumped them.
I don't know what that is. Well, look at Whitley Strieber. One of his cases, he talks about he's driving up the highway. Next thing he knows, he's sitting on the side of the highway between his house and the camp. You don't know how he got there or why he got there. And it's just a weird scenario. Maybe they get rushed. Maybe they're in a hurry. Who knows what the hell it is. But they do every now and then. They screw up like that. It always freaks me out when stuff like that happens.
I mean, I've never ever heard anything like that. That's just it's crazy.
Yeah, those kind of cases just floor you when you hear them. And when you can't find anything against them, you have to kind of go, damn. And then sometimes I think ET does that for us.
Maybe they do. Maybe they do it for SNCCs. Maybe they have a sense of humor.
Well, I know they changed the way they do things because of the researchers. The reason missing time has been going the way of the dodo bird is because of the researchers. All of them had changed their tactics because we realized when people were missing time, it was abductions. Well, they don't want us getting too smart, Also, the same thing with the memories. By using cover memories, we were breaking cover memories. We knew they were fake memories. Using looped memories is much harder because the person a lot of times don't even know anything happened.
Right.
And even when you find out something happened, you still got to break that loop memory, which to them is a real memory, so it's hard to break. Those kind of things make it weird, make it hard. But that shows you right there that ET has changed the way it does things directly because of the researchers in the field. So it shows you they pay attention.
It's absolutely fascinating.
It always freaks me out. And then, like I tell everybody, when it comes to abduction research, take it with a grain of salt because we may change things. Like a decade ago, I always thought the aliens abducted evenly. The Greys, reptilians, and humans abducted evenly. Well, we've done several polls since then, and no, we were wrong. The Greys seem to abduct 60 to 70% of all the abductions are Greys. The rest are split evenly between the reptilians and the humans. They seem to be about 15% each. Maybe a long time ago it was a higher percentage, but now it seems to have gone the other way. And the only reason we found that out was because of the questionnaires. We ran the one on our site, and then with a couple other researchers we know, we had it posted and asked only contactees take it. And overwhelmingly, the amount of contactees were Greys. Overwhelmingly, it was just flooring how much the difference was. It was one of those things that we just weren't expecting, to be honest with you, John. We just weren't expecting it. We expected to find what we always thought. It was a split,
right?
33.3% across the board, and it wasn't. So that was. So we had to correct ourselves, and I can honestly say this: as far as I know to date, we are the only organization to exist that will stop, say we were wrong, and correct ourselves. We do not have a fear of admitting that we have made a mistake or that we have found data that now suggests that something else was going on. Because when you're doing what we're doing, you can't take everything as gospel, and you have to understand that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn sometimes, like with the Hill case. The Hill case was misdiagnosed 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've corrected that now. Instead of people fighting me in the field, they should go, all right, we do know what's going on now. Let's correct the case and move on. Instead of keeping it as a wrong case, because it just makes all the rest of us look stupid.
Right.
Because once people hear me talk, they're like, well, wait a minute, Joe, why are they fighting you about this? So then it makes the rest of the field look like, well, y'all are ignorant. He's definitely got the right idea, and y'all are just stupid. I think that's why a lot of the big name ufologists decided to side with me, because I was doing the 60th anniversary at Roswell, and I had brought this up. And a lot of the audience definitely, 95% of the audience definitely agreed with what I was saying. And the whole panel was up there. All the big-time ufologists were on the panel. So the questions started getting asked to them, and they just had to start agreeing. They were like, oh, no, Joe seems like he's got a better plausible explanation, because they weren't going to go against the general audience. But there's still, like I said, Mr. Stanton, Mrs. Martin, and a few others out there that are hardcore Hill fans, but I don't get it.
People come around because that evidence is amazing. I mean, like I say, after you said that, I instantly I realize exactly what you mean. I mean, the star map, I never thought about that. That should have just been something projected on the wall or in the middle of space, probably, not just a pull-down projector type.
Yeah, it's just, and see, that's one of the things that got Kathleen in trouble. In her book, she says it's some kind of glowing screen, but in the first book they say it's a pull down map. Now, wait a minute here.
Big difference.
big difference here. And they say one thing in the first book about the star map and another thing in the second one. So, let's not change things to fit what you want to do so you can make some money. That just pisses me off. I'm like, let's not, and I'm hardcore. I'll plug anybody's book for them because, I want people in the field to make money because it takes money to be in this field. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I own my own business, so I can get away with a lot of stuff, but let's not just make stuff up. Let's be honest. There's enough of that already.
Definitely. Way too much of that.
Yeah. If you're a rookie coming in this field and you go type in UFO or abduction on the internet, you're lost. You're going to get basically 3 pages of nothing but BS and wish you never even looked at any of this.
That's very, very true.
You'll be like, oh, please. But there's a lot of good researchers out there. I don't want to take away from any people that are doing good work, because there are a lot of good people doing a lot of hard work in the field. There are a lot of shenanigans going on, and there is a lot of garbage out
Well, just
there.
take everything. I always tell everyone this, too. When you find something on the internet, do more research. Take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it as the gospel. Never read something on the web and think it's true.
Well, you like to do a lot of paranormal investigation. Here's something for y'all as listeners, because I know John has a big paranormal listening crowd because of some of the remarks I see on the site. If you have an interest in, vampires, fairies, werewolves, strange, weird sci-fi stuff, it's a good chance that you're a contactee.
Oh, really? Oh, crap.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, crap.
And paranormal events tend to run concurrent. God, my English is bad today. Sorry, y'all.
It's okay.
Not enough sleep last night or something. Anyway, you will find a lot of paranormal activity with contactees.
You're kidding.
Oh, no.
Now you're freaking me out.
It's quite common, actually. And another little secret, which I know is going to make a lot of people mad, we're almost positive now that people who see UFOs are probably abductees or contactees. And the reason we say this now is a couple of key cases. One, the New York City case, oh man, what's her name? Anyway, it's where the ambassador from the UN seen her floating out the window with the 2 Secret Service guards.
Oh yeah, I recall that one.
I apologize, Linda Castillo. I don't want to miss her name, but
Right.
There's 22 million people in New York, people. Why didn't anybody else see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these people that did see it, and I actually had the good fortune of getting to interview one of the Secret Service guys. It never made the air because I was told, well, I'm not going to tell you what I was told, but I was basically told don't air it.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the good fortune to talk to him. He's definitely a contactee, definitely. I have no doubt that the other 2 were contactees. But more importantly, in 94, 96, 92, somewhere up in there was a sighting over Mexico City. Mexico City is the largest populated city in the world with 24 million Mexicans living there. 24 million.
Right.
Okay, living there. 1 million people seen this thing. It hovered over Mexico City for a whole day. The mayor seen it. The police chief seen it. The fire chief seen it. All kind of pastors and preachers seen it. They filmed it. I said there was close to 10,000 hours of videotape of this weird, clear, silver-looking thing hanging in the sky. And it all started over a bird flying into something that wasn't there and falling out the sky, which is a scene from some movie. I forgot which one now. A recent one, too. But anyway, make a long story short, why did another 23 million people see it? It's there for 24 hours. Only that 1 million people seen it. Why didn't the rest of Mexico City see it? Because there probably aren't contactees, and that million that seen it probably were.
Wow.
We think, and this is a key word, think, that contactees are preconditioned to see them. Like on a mass abduction, they'll see them just before they're taken or right after they're put back, which is what we think happened in Mexico City. We think it was a mass abduction, and they stayed there over the city while they were doing a mass abduction. But this isn't the only place this has happened. There are key cities in the United States, like when we were talking about the O'Hara case.
Yeah.
How many people are at O'Hara Airport? Why didn't only, 6 people see it? 9 people see it?
That's a huge
It's
airport.
a huge airport with tons of traffic going in and out of it. So, when we really start looking into this, we never could figure out why more people don't see them. They're flying all over the damn place. Mm-hmm. So we never could figure out why more people don't have sightings. Even after 911, sightings did go up, and that was because more people were looking up. But we really think it had more to do with more people were looking up, but more contactees were looking up. Everybody was a little nervous after 911 that a plane might fall out on your head or something.
Yeah.
So everybody was a tad bit nervous about it, especially if you lived in a big city near any kind of airports. You were kind of a little leery about it. So seeing that, made us wonder. We like the Belgium site in the Big Black Triangle. This thing spent like 3 days going all over Belgium. We had F-16 pilots see it. We had the UN knew about it. The NATO scrambled pilots to it. Thousands of people across Belgium seeing it. But the area it crossed, there was like 17 million people across the area it crossed, but yet only a few thousand seen it. It actually hovered over that one town in Belgium. There was 56,000 people living there.
Mm-hmm.
Like 6 people seen it. Matter of fact, what was so funny about that one, that's where the F-16 first engaged this thing at. And no one seen it. Now, F-16s are noisy. I mean, especially when they got afterburners kicked in and they're going on target, they're noisy. I mean, you can hear them suckers coming for a mile. And no one noticed this thing.
Kind of strange.
And when you go back to the old world sightings, you will hear like there's a sighting in London where 500 people seen it. One artist drew pictures of it, but the rest of London didn't see it. Why? I mean, they said these things were all over, but yet only a few hundred people seen it. It's hard for me. And then, like the Jeff Chandler, whatever his name was, one of the astronauts. He was working on the Hubble telescope, and the girl in the bay is filming him working on the telescope, and you hear her go, "What the bleep?" Something went between her and a camera.
Uh-huh.
But it was so close to the ship you couldn't tell what it is. It just kind of blotted out the camera as it went by. And right as she said it, you hear Jeff turn around and say, "What the is that?" It's just how he said it too. And of course, NASA pretty much shut most of that down, but that was before the 7-second delay. Same thing with the STS-41 video when they're shooting that laser at the thing. That was also before the 7-second delay. That's why we managed to get video, because back in the old days, people would record NASA missions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the 7-second delay, there's no reason to record it because you're never going to catch anything. But why didn't the rest of the shuttle astronauts see it? Why didn't the people on the ground at NASA see it? Why didn't anybody see this thing but these two people? And how come you'll be in places like Florida or any other state for that matter, and there'll be a sighting in the middle of a town, but only a handful of people see it?
So you think that just the contactees, previous contactees, you see the things?
I think people that have had exposure to them are the ones that see them.
Wow.
I hate to say it because so many people get mad at me, and it scares so many just everyday people that have seen UFOs. It scares them, because they're like, oh, no, I just seen a UFO. I'm not an abductee. I said, well, how do you know? I said, most abductees will never know they've been abducted. How do you know? I said, unless you try to recover their memories, how do you really know that you're not an abductee? And that's and this is more important than everything I just said. To prove this point, I started randomly calling UFO witnesses, just not contactees, just UFO witnesses, and asking them if they would submit to regression. Well, I got to be honest with you, most of them told me no. Okay. But about 24 said yes. And guess what? They turned out to be abductees.
Really?
Under deep regression, the memories came out. And by the way, we don't lead anybody. We just ask them, tell us what you've seen on the event the day. Like in the case, I said, well, Mary, tell me what you seen on March 21st when you spotted that thing in the sky. I didn't even use the word UFO or anything. And they described it. Then I said, well, tell me what else was going on. Did anything else happen? And then, of course, they would start talking about actually what happened. And then you realize they were abducted. So, for me, it's important to get people to understand that, because I don't think, like, let's look at Rendlesham Forest. There's a whole military base. What, 10 people seen it?
Right.
It's a big forest with a big city around it. It's Rendlesham.
That was a fascinating case, too.
It is. It's an excellent case, actually. And there's a lot more going on there. Thanks to Peter and Larry let me get in the middle of this. There's a lot more going on here, which I'm not going to talk about today, because I'm sure Peter's going to talk about some of it at the conference in June. And there's some stuff that we haven't even discussed yet that I've found since I talked to them. I will tell you this, and this is like an exclusive for anybody listening to this show. I have no doubt that Larry Warren was definitely mill-labbed, and I'm pretty sure that the other ones were too. And I think it's the first time it's ever been talked about. And by the way, they probably agree with me. I don't think it's a big deal for them, but for the listening audience, it probably is. Everybody's always talked about it just being an experience out in the woods. Now, in all fairness, that experience could have been some type of aerial drug, some type of LSD, and then they mill-labbed them afterwards to find out what happened. So that doesn't necessarily mean there was ET involvement, but I'm not ruling that out either. Mm-hmm. There was something that some of the other ones said that suggests that there was maybe some type of extraterrestrial involvement in that particular case. And if there was ET involved with military soldiers, you can bet the military mill-labbed somebody's butt to find out what they could find out. Because, they describe walking in that field and the 3 pods in the ground and things like that. It's just, I'm not sure what kind of witnesses Jim Peniston and John Burroughs are, because of some of the stuff they said recently. Mm-hmm. Kind of throws me for a loop. But hey, contactees go crazy all the time, so.
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with.
Non-contactees do too.
Yeah. Actually, they probably go crazier more often. And there's other weird things too, like contactees tend to have an above normal IQ. It'll usually be 140 or higher.
Okay, now I know I'm safe.
Well, so you don't know that. You don't know till you get tested. And they'll something else that's weird about contactees though is they're very selective about their friends. They're very sociable people, mind you, but they prefer to associate with people in their own groups. Family, friends, and maybe other contactees or other strange people. They tend to want to associate with them. But what's more important than that, and what's really, really weird about it is all of them, when you ask them this, if I say, like I said, well, if something happened to your kid, what would you do? They'd freak. And if I said what happened to such and such, they'd freak. And then, if you ask a normal everyday person about, mass destruction of the planet, it usually bothers them and upsets them. You ask contactees, they accept it. Like it's part of what's going to happen, and they show no remorse. So the contactee group in this planet don't really, they from the way they explain it to me, they feel disconnected from everybody else on the planet. It's like they're outside of the norm, standing on the side watching or something, and watching and waiting might be a better way of saying it.
Right now, while you're saying this, there's people out there in the listening audience with little light bulbs going off in their head,
Oh,
probably.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And it just does it. It's something about contactees. It's not that they're mean or cruel or vicious. They're very loving, very kind kind of people. It's just when it comes to everyday humans, they just don't feel that humanity that everybody else does. It's maybe it's the alien blood in them. I don't know what it is, but they do feel disconnected. They, like when like the 911 towers. Everybody was just, oh my God. Contactees were upset that it happened, but they didn't have any great sense of loss like the rest of the country did. Wow. And you could really see the difference. Also, something else I found weird. All these supposable psychics on the planet, no one could predict 911. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you this: almost all of our contactees 2 weeks prior to 911 got this weird, freaky feeling. They were all coming into chat rooms and stuff. Man, I don't know what it is, Joe. Something's weird. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Something's weird. All of them. It's off. Something doesn't feel right. Something's going on. And man, I heard this on and on and on and on and on. And then boom, the Twin Towers happened. But in all fairness, none of them could predict the Twin Towers. They just knew something was wrong. Matter of fact, to put it in perspective, a month before Katrina, I was getting phone calls from some of my more psychic contactees telling me I should move.
Oh, really?
That something was going to happen to New Orleans. But they didn't know what. They just knew there was something wrong. And actually, they didn't even say something was going to happen. They just kept saying, something's wrong about where you live. Something's wrong about where you live. Something's wrong about where you live. But no one knew what. And, you're not going to take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt because I didn't, they might be crazy. And I'm not going to get up and move because a bunch of crazy people.
But you got numerous people that told you that, though, right?
Yeah, numerous. About 24, actually.
And you didn't move?
No, but I did leave for the storm.
There you go.
And in all my life, it is the only storm I have ever evacuated for. Ever. And I've been through some hairy, scary storms, much stronger than Katrina was. Katrina was actually only a Cat 3 when it got here. I was here for Betsy, which was 4.5, and Camille, which was a 5. So, I had never left for a storm before. Even my family was kind of freaked out that I was making everyone leave. Mm-hmm. I'm like, matter of fact, Linda and I, this is so funny how this happened. Long story short, we were out Friday night at the casino in Gulfport, Mississippi at the Biloxi Grand gambling. And drinking, we were planning on spending a weekend up there, because no one really had an idea where the storm was actually going yet. So we're sitting there, we're drinking. It's about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm sitting at the bar having a couple White Russians playing video poker, and I was watching this storm, and I'm thinking about these people that were talking to me, and I'm watching the storm, and every now and then I noticed it would just jog a little bit to the left, and I got this really bad feeling that it was going for New Orleans. So I went and found Linda. I said, you know what? We're going to check out our hotel tonight, and we're going to go home. And in the morning, we're going to get the family, and we're going to leave. Well, the hotel we were staying in the casino we were gambling, the casino ended up on top of the hotel we were staying in.
Oh, my gosh.
The storm actually lifted the whole casino up out of the water and dropped it on top of the casino we were staying at. What scared me even worse was the people who owned and run the place said they were not going to leave. So more than likely, they didn't make it.
Wow.
So we get home the next day. I'm calling all my family and said, we're leaving at 12 today. Be ready or be left behind. Everybody was like, Joe, you never leave for a storm. I'm like, and then one of my stepdaughters, she wasn't going to come. And then, her mom's like, Joe never leaves for a storm. So she's like, you're right. We're getting the hell out of here.
Yeah, that's a warning sign.
Good thing she left because there was 12 foot of water in her house.
Wow.
My other daughter, the roofs caved in on an apartment complex and there was 3 foot of water in her house. The only house that didn't take any damage was ours. We got 3 inches of water in the house. That was it. And if we would have been home, we wouldn't even got that because we'd have just thrown sandbags at the front door. We wouldn't even got any water. But it was weird. And, we got a lot of first live broadcast from the city of New Orleans was done by the Paranormal Radio Network the Wednesday after the storm.
Was it? Cool. Yes,
we were broadcasting live from the city. The first office building up and running went to my company. First apartment complex up and running went to my company. So I hope when they do their history book on Katrina, at least we get some kind of honorable mention.
Yeah, they remember you.
Yeah, well, somebody said they were writing, and a lady told me she wrote in to tell them they were wrong about the office buildings. We had the first one up and running, and we did. We were here working. This office building was almost running before any major crews had even gotten into the city. We were home and going. We had passes to get back in and the whole 9 yards, and we were ready to work. So we got in and did it. And then, like we were talking about earlier, people were seeing reptilians running around.
Yeah,
I got to tell you,
that's
I had a
creepy.
gun. I had a gun on my side for at least the first 6 months I was home. Not because of reptilians, mind you, but because of some of the crazies that were loose in the city.
Right.
A couple of times I walked up on stuff like I was in one yard working on something. Some dog come out from under the house, looked like he hadn't eaten in 3 weeks. Looked like he wanted me for lunch. I didn't shoot him, but I thought I might have to, but I didn't have to. It was one of them things. What was weird, though, I didn't see any UFOs over the city at all after the storm. Nothing. And I got to say, the first night we were home, we went outside because there was no light and there's no electricity at all. The sky was stunningly gorgeous over the city. It's a shame how beautiful that sky was because you'll never see it again unless something happens to the city. It's not even that pretty on the coast. It has something to do with where the city's located. It was just absolutely a stunning sky. And I never knew that sky even existed over my city.
I bet it had to be incredibly quiet too, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. Oh, yeah, it was freaking people out. I had people coming in from like Canada and Texas and all over to come down and help us. And I brought a crew down to the city of New Orleans. This was about 10 days after the storm. I went to go look at one of the properties for one of my owners. And I get down there, and we're on Canal Street. And this is a 500-year-old city. And you could hear a pin drop.
Wow.
No birds, no dogs, no nothing, no cars, no nothing. There was no animals or nothing. You got this sense of everything that was left behind in the city, for the last 500 years of its existence was now loose and moving around. It gave you this really weird, creepy, weird. Matter of fact, most of the guys didn't want to go back down there after that. Nobody really wanted to go back to the city until they actually started having people in the city again.
Of course, you had reptilians walking around, too.
It was just, but see, you hadn't even mentioned that part yet. I didn't even want to go on the air with that at the time. I was like, oh, my God, people are really freaked out. They find out we got reptilians walking around the city of New Orleans. And National Guard, NOPDs are talking about it. They're going to freak out. They really was. But it was an interesting place to be and a very strange place to be. Now, I did see one really good video about an hour before about 10 hours before the storm was getting to the city. You could see this massive cloud bank, way, way high, lightning flickering across it, rain pouring underneath it. And it's an impressive cloud bank. And whoever took it was standing on one of the bridges out in St. Bernard. And they got it. It's actually Katrina coming in. Oh. And it's what it is. It's like the main part of the storm coming in. And he got this picture. Well, I'm looking at the picture and I was really impressed when it gives you this really powerful, creepy, really fear. Well, in the picture is a silver saucer. Oh. Clear as day. We couldn't figure out what it was at first. It kept looking like something shining, but there was no sunlight. We were like, what the hell is that? Put it in one of the paint shops, blew it up, and sure enough.
It was riding in on the storm, huh?
Yeah, I asked the guy if he had seen it. He said he didn't remember seeing it. But when he seen it in the video, he was like, damn. But he said he never seen it with the naked eye. He never noticed it. He didn't notice it until one of our guys picked it out of the photo. But it was wild. It was just a weird, strange place to be for those first few months afterwards.
I'm glad you made it out okay too. So many people. We're starting to run a little low here on time. Yeah. Do you want to give out any information, web addresses, or anything? You're also the host of UFO Undercover too. I didn't say that, but do you want to give out some more web addresses here or anything?
Okay, I'll give them out real quick. Yes, I do host UFO Undercover. It's one of the largest radio shows on the internet, not just in the paranormal or UFO world, but in general. It's over 1.5 million listeners. And some days it gets even higher than that. So it's a very large show. I do it every Wednesday night, 7 to 9 on the Paranormal Radio Network, www.paranormalradionetwork.com or www.ufoundercover.com. But the more important sites, and don't get me wrong, the Paranormal Radio Network is very important to me. It's a very big part of my life. But www.ICAR1.com, that is the research site. That is where you can go if you want to be researched. And I'm going to give you all a site that I rarely ever talk about, www.alienenigma.org or .com. This is a personal website where I put up some of my original experiences a decade ago. Actually, 12 years ago, I posted it to this. Well, this is 2012. 14 years ago, I posted this to this site. In case I ever came out with my own personal experiences, I didn't want people to think I was jumping on the bandwagon. So before I formed I.C.A.R or the Paranormal Radio Network, I got involved in this in any public view, I actually put this site up for people to go see.
That's cool.
So it's a personal website. It never gets updated, so please don't write to me about when I'm going to update it, because it ain't. It's just a plausible deniability site is basically what it is, or the opposite way around. But that's what it's there for. And I know people ask me about it from time to time. So there are some experiences that Linda and I talk about our Golf Breeze trip. So you might want to go check it out and just see for yourself. I think that's everybody. I hope I didn't miss anybody. You already know where Threshold is. So if you don't, shame on you.
Okay. Well, we're on UFO Paranormal Radio Network, too.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, y'all should know where he is by now. Shame on y'all.
Okay. Well, and Joe, I mean, this has been an amazing talk, too. I really appreciate it.
No, I had a great time, John. I really did.
Okay. It sounds good. Well, thanks again, Joe, and we'll talk to you later.
All right.
And to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
We have the father of ufology on, who is also Sam's good friend, right?
I acknowledge it. I don't know if Stan will.
Yeah, we're good buddies.
Yeah. We've had some great times together, and hopefully some many, many more, too. As we progress into the years, it's funny how the aging of our camaraderie, our friends and our associates, we need some young blood in our group, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We have a few. John Greenwald, for example, Nick Redfern, there are some good guys.
A lot of conferences and good times to go. In fact, we even have some information that you and I are going to be working on. We may be talking about hopefully this year pertaining to the some actual individuals that worked on the bodies at Roswell that you and I are going to be working on bringing forward. So
that would be great.
You betcha. And I think that would really be an added a little added bump to the story, to the scenario, to the case. And on Roswell itself, so many times we hear time and time again how the so-called cynics, skeptics, whatever you want to call them,
debunkers.
Yes, there we go. And they keep talking about the weather balloon. Can we put the weather balloon to bed? Please, can you tell people why the weather balloon is just not at all possible?
Well, there are several reasons. Part of the problem is that we see stuff on television that is total baloney. They show this huge polyethylene balloon, like a skyhook balloon, and connected to Roswell, and none of those were in existence at the time. The mogul balloon explanation makes no sense for several reasons. One is a mogul balloon train consisted of typically 20 to 25 standard, normal neoprene balloons. You inflate them, generally they'd be a few feet in diameter. You could buy them at surplus stores back then. And with this balloon train that was anywhere from 500 to 600 feet long, there were 20 feet of twine between one balloon and the next balloon. And there were a bunch of radar reflectors, which were very fragile triangles of balsa wood with foil material on them, which would show up on radar, but they had to be very lightweight because the balloons have limited lifting power. They also had little ballast tanks, and they had a radio, and a balloon was put up for a very classified reason, this balloon train, but none of the technology was classified. None of it. And the reason, the classified reason that these were launched was to monitor, hopefully, Soviet nuclear weapons tests. And the idea is if it would stay at a constant altitude, it would tune in on what might be described as a communication channel through the upper atmosphere. They had found with submarines that there were channels in the ocean where sound could be heard thousands of miles away, just because of the characteristics of that layer of the ocean. And they felt the same thing would happen when you were up in the atmosphere. And these things, they ran a bunch of launches. They were not very successful. They were very awkward systems, and they were not the means we used to detect the first Russian nuclear weapon, which was in August of 1949. Now, 49, 2 years after Roswell. And the kicker here is that A, everything was conventional. B, all the ranchers in the area, and certainly Major Marcel and Colonel Blanchard, were all familiar with radar reflector balloon combinations. Jesse had taken a course on using them. He had a brief pilots about weather conditions when they were taking off on various missions, pseudo-bombing missions across the United States and stuff. So he was very familiar with them. And all the ranchers picked up the balloons for two reasons. One was most of them had a little tag on them that says return the instrument pack and you'll get $3, something like that. The second, and they didn't mind getting the money, but the second reason was that animals, sheep and cattle, might eat these things. And it would be very poor for the digestive tract of sheep and cows. So they gathered these things up. They were all familiar with them. The rancher in question, Mac Brazel, had recovered balloons. And what he said in the paper on July 9th was, if there's one thing he's certain of, is that it wasn't a balloon. Okay. Now, there's also the question of when they were launched. They didn't launch one of these things every day. They were planned launches to see how well they behaved and what altitude they went to and, whether everything worked right. And when the original article in the Roswell newspaper came out on July 8th, the Roswell Daily Record, it said, found last week. That's July 8th. Now, this article appeared not only in Roswell. I just read an article where somebody said that was the only place it appeared. I got articles from the Chicago Daily News, right, from the Sacramento Bee, from the Los Angeles Herald Express, from the Spokane Chronicle, from the the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and a whole bunch of other papers, evening papers from Chicago West. Found last week. Now, when the rancher was brought back in and reprogrammed by the Air Force, suddenly it was found on June 14th. Now, if you can get June 14th as last week from July 8th, boy, you're a better man than I am, Gunga. Well, I guess it's part of their time travel.
Yeah, there you go.
Because they did manage to explain the bodies that were supposedly found around Roswell.
Yeah, what was their excuse?
Well, crash test dummies. Well, the kicker here is that the Air Force did drop a whole bunch of these things. The idea was planes were flying much higher and faster, and if you got to get out in a hurry, ejection seats and all this kind of stuff, you want to know how the pilot will be treated, but nobody's volunteering to be the test body for that, you understand?
No doubt.
So they launched a whole bunch of crash test dummies. Now, the salient thing about these, two very important characteristics which are relevant here, is that none of them were dropped until 1953, 6 years after Roswell. So we have time travel for crash test dummies. The second thing is, and I talked to the man who was in charge of the program in person in Albuquerque. We met. Colonel Madsen. He's dead now, unfortunately, but it's too bad the Air Force didn't talk to him in some detail. His picture's in the big Air Force report, and he pointed out to me very forcefully, look, for the test to be meaningful, the dummies had to be the same size and weight as pilots. They were 6 feet tall, and they were 175 pounds, and they were dressed in uniforms, mind you. Well, there's a reason for that. Wind effects and all the rest of that. If a guy's flying an airplane in combat, he's wearing a uniform, and he's not going to have time to change into something more comfy for getting into the airplane at 40
Before he jumps.
Yeah, right.
So that they couldn't have been distinguished by the ranchers, and that they would be mistaken for aliens. How do you morph a 6 feet tall, 175-pound dummy in the uniform, mind you, for a 4 feet tall little guy with a big head?
Yeah.
I mean, utterly absurd.
Well, they also
So,
did the caskets that day too. So how many caskets were ordered for like 3-foot tall caskets or something like that for kids?
Well, yeah, we have Glenn Dennis talking about the caskets that the Air Force talked about. Well, maybe they feel there was a compression problem when they... It's time travel for them, of course, you
Right.
understand.
They shrink
There's another
it,
problem here, too. When we go back and check the various launches of the mogul balloon trains, ain't no way none of them could have been on the Foster Ranch on the dates in question.
Wrong direction.
Dr. David Rudiak and Brad Sparks have done excellent research, digging out the files as to when these things were launched, what was the weather like, which ways were the winds blowing, at what speed, and all the rest of that. And incidentally, as an aspect of this, how highly classified these things were, there were no chase planes used. When they came to ground, they came to ground. Nobody went out there to recover them. Now, if they were that classified, darn it, somebody would have been there to recover them. That's standard practice with high security. Remember there was even an accident, what was it, a B-1 had a collision with a Air Force chase plane.
Yes.
Well, there were no chase planes on these things. So the balloon argument simply doesn't hold up. If you listen to the witness testimony, that includes Major Marcel, who was the first military guy out there, and his son Jesse Marcel Jr., and other first-hand witnesses like Mac Brazel's, the rancher's son, Bill Brazel, and I've talked to all three of them, you find that it just doesn't fit. The characteristics don't match balloons. For example, any 3-year-old could tear those radar reflectors. It was balsa wood. Breaks pretty easy. And some of the key features of the materials were high strength, very lightweight, light as balsa. That was a standard phrase back then. Heavy as lead, light as balsa. Those were the standards,
Right.
So, and they had strange symbols on them. Now, they try to explain that one away with, well, a toy manufacturer made the tape holding the foil to the balsa stringers. Well, anybody can break a piece of balsa wood without any trouble. These things couldn't be broken. They couldn't be burnt. They couldn't be bent. The I-beam shaped pieces, and they had these strange symbols. That's not toy tape. Jesse Marcel Jr. handled this stuff.
Yeah.
So he's not telling you a third-hand story.
No.
Jesse Marcel Sr. handled this stuff. And the thing is that, well, we have other co-conspirators here. Cabot, Sheridan W. Cabot, was a counterintelligence corps guy on the base. And Colonel Blanchard told Major Marcel to take one of the counterintelligence corps guys with him and follow the rancher back to his place to see what's there. Because the rancher had said there's loads of this stuff out there. If all he had was a little bundle of paper and rubber and stuff like that, which is what the follow-up article said,
Sure.
He would have brought it in his little truck, and there would have been no reason for Marcel and Cabot to go out there. But Colonel Blanchard told Marcel, take one of our counterintelligence corps guys with you. He was worried about who was trying to spy on the 509th, which, contrary to the opinions given by some of the nasty, noisy negativists, it was the most elite military group in the entire world. They dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and 2 more in Operation Crossroads in 1946. And so Blanchard had legitimate worries about if there's all this junk out there, who's been out there? What are they doing there? There's a lot of nothing around Roswell.
Right.
I went with some journalists from Japan. We went 54 miles without seeing another person or another vehicle. You can't do that in Japan, incidentally. There are plenty of places in New Mexico where you can do that. So what I'm saying is the materials don't match. The characteristics don't match what the witness said. The timing doesn't match. It's baloney. Unfortunately, the press bought the baloney.
True.
They all bought whole tons of it from their delicatessen. It's really sad.
We're still
because
eating it today.
It's so obvious that that the stories are lies, flat out, unconditional lying. And I don't go for that as a physicist, frankly. I want facts and data.
Yeah, so
Don't
that's
feed
the
me
other
baloney.
thing. Yeah, that's the other thing. You're a physicist, and in what was it? Seeing is Believing with Peter Jennings. They didn't mention that, did they?
No, well, Peter Jennings' mockumentary.
I like this guy.
Seeing is Believing. They interviewed me for an hour, and it was a pretty good interview, done in Roswell, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't unhappy with it until after we were finished. The guy who was interviewing me said, "Stan, don't you think," this is off camera, "don't you think that if a saucer had crashed at Roswell, that half the scientists in the country would be working on analyzing the materials?" I said, "Absolutely not. Those who can do, those who can't teach." Well, the kicker is there's a huge establishment set up during the war, mind you, well before Roswell, of highly trained people, engineers, scientists, with the best equipment out there working on military-related research and development stuff in secret. I was part of that outfit, not those years, but a few years later. Los Alamos employed 8,000 people, for goodness sakes. Oak Ridge had thousands of people. Lawrence Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, Sandia Nuclear Weapons Lab, the Hanford Works. Just like Lockheed built stealth at a cost of $10 billion. It wasn't done at a university.
No.
Utterly ridiculous. And
publish or perish is a good
line. That interview with me, so I got worried when I had that question after we were finished. When I watched the program, they used 20 seconds, and they called me a promoter twice and didn't say I was a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
I mean, I only worked for companies like GE, GM, Westinghouse, Aerojet General, McDonnell Douglas, TRW Systems, These are the big guys on the block, you know. Now, furthermore, how can I put this? The activities, the whole business of security was clearly left out of this discussion. The SETI guys don't think there's any national security element. Now, when they interviewed Jesse Marcel, they used much more of his interview. They never bothered to mention such things as he's a medical doctor, he's a flight surgeon. He was, at that time, he was home on leave serving in Iraq as a flight surgeon and a helicopter pilot. He was called back in at age 68, mind you. Put in 225 combat hours in helicopters. You'd think he also served on aircraft accident investigative teams. You'd think that would have been relevant as to his credibility. Not a word of it.
Yes.
So when I say mockumentary, and Susan Clancy in her silly discussion on abductions. There were two areas, abductions and Roswell, where they really screwed up royally.
Well, you have so much experience with the Betty and Barney Hill case. You and your partner, Kathleen Martin, yes, who is just a wonderful researcher and co-author, by the way. Excellent books. You've done such great work together, a good team. But can you touch on the Betty and Barney Hill case a little bit?
Yeah.
Well, whenever you feel
like it.
The
book is captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. Kathleen is Betty's niece. And she heard about it. Betty, the next day after the original experience, called Kathleen's mother. Kathleen was home at age 13. And her mother had had a sighting years before, and Betty called her. Now, this is all before the hypnosis stuff. Just mentioned that they'd seen a saucer, and that it was close and very strange and so forth. And so Kathleen was in on it a couple days later. They visited Betty and Barney and saw the strange silver dollar-shaped marks on the car, which went wild when compasses were placed next to them. So she's been involved with the case, and she was very close to Betty and was her primary carekeeper, really, with in the last years of Betty's life. And so she has all the tapes and all the correspondence and files and all that of Betty's. She's some of them are now at the University of New Hampshire archives. So Kathleen was right up there with it. She also is a certified hypnotherapist. She was MUFON's certifier of investigators, administered the test for people who wanted to be investigators and so forth. So she's been involved in ufology for a very long time. Now, let's face it, she wrote 85% of what's in Captured. I was the heavy. I mean, I had met Betty and Barney, Betty many times, but Barney before his death. And I was the first to publish about the star map and things like that. But she did most of the work, and I took after the nasty, noisy negativist, because I won't say I like doing that. But
you're very good at handling them. You're very good. And speaking of the nasty, noisy negativist, Susan Clancy's take on all this abduction scenario theory is basically, it's insane. I mean, the things she comes up with. First of all, we've even had group abductions during the day, and she's saying this is mainly accounted for by what? By night sleep paralysis
during the day.
My gosh!
The research I've done on abduction, there's no reason.
It's insane.
It's insane.
And Betty and Barney had him drive that car while asleep?
Yes. Imagine that. And then what accounts for the physical evidence?
Well, the star map.
The star map.
To me, that star map
Marjorie
is the most
Fish.
amazing.
Well,
that was impressive.
To illustrate her lack of accuracy, she talks about the sighting up in Maine. There were 4 people involved. She said there were 2 twin brothers, and she had the year wrong by 10 years, and she said one of them wrote the book about it. Well, it was Ray Fowler who wrote the book.
Yeah.
And there were 4 guys involved, not 2, and she says she's read everything that's ever been written on UFOs and abductions and so forth, and she got everything wrong. Now, she did pick up an expert, Seth Shostak, she calls an expert on UFOs, who knows nothing about them. It's truly extraordinary. And one of the chapters in our new book, we talk about Susan Clancy and her strange research in Captured, but there's also an update about the abduction conundrum in the new book, Science Was Wrong, which has the interesting subtitle of Startling Truths About Cures, Theories, and Inventions They Declared Impossible. We each did 7 chapters. I did one on UFOs. She did one on the abduction conundrum. And then we covered a lot of medical stories and technology stories. You know, man will never fly in an airplane. And
that was one of my favorites.
Butter bilge and all this sort of junk.
Oh, I loved it. Loved it.
So Kathy did the abduction conundrum thing and did a great job on that.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And we're talking about doing more articles. You want to get your books out there, and I am older than Kathy, so I'm getting old faster than she is.
Oh, gosh, no.
Even though it's a year at a time.
You've got more energy than me. I tell you, you're remarkable. You could come in at 3 o'clock in the morning and be ready to speak in a matter of a few hours. How you pulled that off, I have no idea. But I said...
Good heredity, and I take lots of vitamins.
There you go. Yeah, good genes.
I get so angry at the noisy negativist that it makes adrenaline so I can keep going.
Well, in the book, you address 2 of my favorite noisy negativists.
We got a new term.
Yeah, of course, Seth, and then Carl Sagan in his later years.
Carl, Carl and I were classmates for 3 years at the University of Chicago. We were in the same class. We were both physics majors. He went on into astronomy. I went off, got my master's, and went off to work in industry. And so we knew each other. We were the same age. I'm maybe 4 months older than he is, and we both grew up in adjacent towns in New Jersey. And I saw him, was at his home with cookies and coffee and stuff a year or so before his death. I was giving a lecture at Cornell, and the guy in charge was an astronomer who took me over to Carl's house. We had a pleasant session together. So now Carl, I have to give credit to, did more than anybody else that I know of to get people interested in the notion of extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yes.
Of course, he said some very dumb things about flying saucers. And, I won't even try to guess why. Was he lazy? Was he the new Donald Menzel, the insider who was working to keep the public interest down while he himself was involved? I don't know. I don't think he was a member of MJ-12. He had some problem. He was never in the military. Menzel had been. And,
right.
Carl did have a security clearance, and we briefly talked about that and agreed that we couldn't talk about anything classified. And I don't push people I know have clearances.
Right.
I had one 14 years, and I respect security. Mm-hmm. But I did write a strong letter in response to his article in Parade magazine about abductions, where he got everything wrong. Even as bad as having the windshield wipers going strong while they were driving in New Hampshire. How do you see a flying saucer if your windshield wipers are going strong because it's pouring like crazy? That's a pretty neat trick. And also Carl has famously said in several places, including in a book, that there are interesting sightings that aren't reliable. There are reliable sightings that aren't interesting, but there are no interesting and reliable sightings, which is total baloney again.
Right.
We're serving a lot of that at lunch today.
I was just going to say that.
Good.
A lot of baloney in here.
Well, Shermer's he's got that little delicatessens, the baloney. What do they call it? The baloney detection kit. So
Well,
Sagan has his
it.
delicatessen.
He doesn't detect it. He serves
exactly.
it.
Shermer's delicatessen. Yeah, talk about him a little bit.
Michael and I appeared on a Larry King show. He sat next to me and played with the little alien doll.
Yeah, he brought his toys to the. You brought the information. He brought the toys.
Yeah, and George Noory was on the show, so I asked him afterward. I had several people write me. I don't understand why I didn't just punch him out. I said, that's not my style.
No, you have class. That's the difference here,
But
you have a lot of class.
I asked George, how about having a debate between us? Because he's had Michael on Coast to Coast. And he called Michael. Michael said yes. And so 2 weeks later or so, we had a debate. Now, I read 2 of his books in the meantime. He hadn't read any of mine. And he started off, I couldn't have set it up any better if I had been in charge. Well, the only reason there are sightings that can't be explained, it's a residue effect. With all these crazy phenomena, there's 5% or so that you can't identify. So that's what, you're always going to find that. Boy, that was an opening big enough to drive a Mack truck through. You're going to let a guy get away with something so stupid? And I pointed out, hey, the biggest study ever done for the Air Force, 21.5% of the cases couldn't be explained, completely separate from the 9.3% for which there was insufficient information. In Dick Hall's The UFO Evidence, 18.5% of 4,500 cases couldn't be explained. In the Condon report, 30% of 117 cases studied in detail could not be identified according to a special UFO subcommittee of the world's largest group of space scientists, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, etc. So it was downhill from there for him, and I got 80% of the vote. They took a vote at the end of the 3-hour debate.
That was fantastic.
So I don't think he'd be willing to debate me again now. I mentioned the debate because people say, well, where do people stand? Can the public, can they establish a viewpoint? Well, I also debated Seth Shostak for 3 hours, and Seth's a nicer guy, but...
Yes. But how many books has he read of yours where you have read of his?
None,
Again,
of course.
Yes.
When we each listened to each other speak on the Queen Elizabeth II, we got a free trip, and we each gave 3 lectures. And in the course of my lecture, I talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies, and I ask after each one, how many people here have read that? and he didn't raise his hand for any of them. And that's the problem with Carl as well. Made a statement, he provided no reference, and the statement is false, absolutely and completely. And I have referenced Blue Book Special Report 14 and stuff that Carl had. So that's the contrast. There are 4 basic rules for debunkers. And it doesn't matter what it is they're trying to debunk. I mean, we cover a lot of areas, and science was wrong. The first rule is don't bother me with the facts. My mind's made up. The second is what the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them. The third is if you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's easier.
Those are great
and
points.
fourth, do your research by proclamation, because investigation is too much trouble and nobody will know the difference. So the SETI community, and everybody knows that SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate. everybody knows that they always say there is no evidence for UFOs, and they never reference any of the studies.
None.
Now, how can you be a scientist and claim there is no reference, there is no data, when there's loads of data out there that's been referenced over and over again? Look at my congressional testimony, if nothing else, and Jim McDonald's congressional testimony. And, so there's tons of data out there. And we have Jill Tarter. This was in the Peter Jennings monstrosity. Remember when she and her husband are flying their plane and they spot a light over there hidden behind the cloud? Could it be? No, it can't be a UFO. Could it be? It turned out to be the moon. That's the best they could come up with. I mean, gee whiz. And she has stated there is no evidence. But she also stated, this one I find funny, that there could be a civilization as close as 1,000 light years. And when we make contact, it'll be the biggest thing that ever happened, and they will help us solve our problems. Hey, we understand you guys got difficulties. What can we do for you? 1,000 years later, hey, this is what our problem is 1,000 years after that. Oh, here's what you do. This is nonsensical.
It is nonsensical.
It's absurd.
Now here, on the line of evidence, we have physical trace evidence. We have radar evidence. We have things that if this were a court case, a murder case, somebody would have been hanging a long time ago, as the statement goes.
Absolutely.
Now,
and they never refer to this evidence.
Never. On the case, on the notion.
That's the crazy thing.
Absolutely. Now, on the notion of physical trace evidence, Ted Phillips has worked on how many thousands?
It's over 4,000 from more than 80 countries. It varies from time to time. And,
yes.
It keeps gathering.
What do you think? Yeah. What do you think? Say, okay, Sam, this is after all these years of research and knowing thousands of people in the field and talking to people all over the country, all over the world. In fact, we'll get into a little more on that. What do you say holds up as being, say, 3 of the most crucial bits of evidence? What can you say are the most upstanding bits of evidence?
Well, it's not bits. It's a question of the large-scale scientific studies. That's the first thing. There are several different ones, and a consistent picture emerges of manufactured objects behaving in ways that we can't duplicate and therefore must have originated someplace else. The evidence doesn't answer the questions generally as to where they come from, what they want, why they don't show up at my house, all kinds of other questions. It just says not manufactured here. If they were manufactured here, we'd be using them in warfare, and there's been no shortage of wars. And I say that because it's the military that have the money to develop sophisticated technology. I know I was in that business. Well, let me give you an example. When I was working on nuclear airplanes at General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, way back in 1958, mind you, we spent $100 million that year.
Wow.
Employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. Now, that's not 8 professors and 20 grad students. There's a lot of dough going out there, like I mentioned, stealth and all the rest of these. And the other part of that, there's an important part of this that I think the ancient academics and fossilized physicists don't seem to know anything about. Well, I mentioned before about this big establishment for doing advanced classified research. They also don't seem to understand that we've been doing, for example, nuclear propulsion for a very long time. Not just chemical rockets, nuclear submarines, 1956, the Nautilus, first one. And there are hundreds of them, not just the United States, but England and France and China and Russia. But my favorite ones, and you won't hear anybody from academia talking about that, we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers that can operate for 18 years without refueling.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, that's advanced technology. And picture how many ships loaded with boat fuel, ship fuel, would have to be used to make up for that one reactor load of nuclear fuel. I worked on nuclear fusion, and, it's as if it didn't exist. Let me give you 3 quick numbers that show you how much progress we've made. We Earthlings are really sharp. A big bomb during World War II was a 10-ton blockbuster. Took a B-29 to carry that. And it made a pretty good hole in the ground and dropped it. 3 years later, 1945, we exploded our first atomic bombs, roughly 15,000 tons of TNT equivalent. That's a big step upward.
Oh, yeah.
And then 7 years after that, in 1952, we exploded our first H-bomb, nuclear fusion device. It released a little more power, the equivalent of 10 million tons of TNT. And the Russians tested one a few years later. It was 57 million tons of TNT equivalent. So, it takes a while to wrap your mind around that. But every advanced civilization will know about nuclear fusion because that's what makes the stars work. Everywhere. Not just our sun. They don't have a patent, and they're not the only ones that can use it. the sun beings. And so I worked on a study on nuclear fusion propulsion. If you use the right stuff in the right way and kick particles out the back end of a rocket that have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. So my mantra is technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future is not an extrapolation of the past. You have to change how you do things. Lasers are not just better light bulbs. The fission nuclear rocket that I worked on in the late 60s are not just better chemical rockets. The biggest one operated at a power level of 4,400 megawatts.
Wow.
That's twice the power of Grand Coulee Dam. That was built by Los Alamos. That was operated. That wasn't a paper study. You wouldn't want to be standing next to it when it was running.
Talk about EM field.
So, people forget that we've done these things. And so, as a matter of fact, it is interesting. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to be in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And
tell us about
it directly relates to that. It's a conference. It's the 5th annual Global Competitiveness Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. They expect about 800 people there. The admission cost for people who aren't speakers, as I am, is $4,000.
Well, I won't be seeing you there.
And there are a whole bunch of panels with fascinating titles, but the one of interest, the original title was "What Can We Learn about innovation from UFOs?" They changed it to "Contact" and they didn't use the word UFO, but it's still the same idea. And there'll be 5 people on a panel. You'll recognize 4 of the names anyway. Michel Kaku.
Oh, great.
Astrophysicist. Nick Pope.
Oh, my gosh. Great.
Jacques Vallée.
Oh, wow.
Myself, and a Muslim scholar who's a scientist on there's a fancy name for an organization of Islam scholars. And we're going to have a panel. And this is going to be an an e-conference. Originally, I was going to be signing books there, but no books. We're only doing everything with iPods and stuff.
Well, you're moving up in the world, my friend. I have to congratulate you. You've really moved up when it comes to technology. Oh, well. So much for that.
At least there are people attending this thing, like the president of Georgia Tech, the head of flight testing for Boeing, a vice president of IBM, all kinds of, politicians. There are 3 Canadians going. I'm one. Our former Prime Minister, Jean Chrétien, will be going, and a woman who's a member of the Canadian Senate, Tony Blair, will be participating.
Wow.
It's an incredibly impressive group. And you can look it up on the internet, GCF, Global Competitiveness Forum number 5.
Well, if I hit the lotto in the meantime...
Do you want to go, Sam?
I think if we hit
between the 2 of us, we'd be 8,000 short.
Yeah.
If that's only if you're pre-registered before January 1st. After that, it's 4,500.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't think I make that.
Well, I got to say one thing. It's going to be a lot warmer there than it is here in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Well, it's certainly going to be warmer.
Okay, on that note, what is the snow level like out your door?
Not much. We haven't had a lot of snow this year. 2 years ago, we had 13 feet altogether. We're expecting a snowstorm tonight. We haven't been hit nearly as hard as the eastern part of the United States has been hit.
Yeah, we talked to Richard Dolan. He was telling us he's buried.
He was buried. Kathleen must have had her share, too. Wait, is Kathleen still living up north, or did she move south on the East Coast?
Oh, no, she's smart. She lives in the Orlando area.
Oh,
and they go north. They go north for the summer.
Ah, smart. Yeah,
her dad still lives up in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Charlie's got family up there too, her husband. So.
Well, good. I knew they. I was thinking about her when this snowstorm came in. Well, snowstorms came in, and I'm thinking, now did they go south? I know they mentioned that they did go there, but
well, they did. And although Georgia had a lot of snow, and North Carolina had a lot of snow.
Oh yeah. So where does
and they're not ready for it like you and me, Sam.
Oh, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, we're used to this stuff. Gosh, our bones aren't, but at least mine aren't.
Well, yeah. I should mention, incidentally, I'm doing a column. It'll be in the MUFON Journal, I guess, about this GCF. My website, www.stantonfriedman.com, lists upcoming events. There's going to be a thing called the Truth Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, on February 4th and 5th. There'll be the International UFO Congress in the Phoenix area, the several days, February 23rd, I think it is, 24th, 25th, 26th. I'll be speaking there too, and Kathleen will be too, as a matter of fact, I guess. But I got to tell you a little story about Lawrence, Kansas. Many, many years ago, I spoke. There's a part of the University of Kansas system is there in Lawrence. And I was asked, I always tell them I'll be available for classes. So I was asked to give a physics seminar, if you will. And I was warned by one of the students as we walked over to do it in the afternoon that, Professor so-and-so has given some indication he thinks this is all baloney. It wasn't the physics department that was bringing me to campus. That was student activities. So, okay, I was prepared, and I made sure I talked about a lot of things in my seminar that, you guys are all familiar with this, aren't you? I knew they weren't. Nuclear rockets, electromagnetic submarines, all kinds of stuff. Just so they knew that their professors didn't know everything. And I played a little game. I asked them, what's the numerical value of 1G, acceleration of gravity at the surface of the Earth? And they all say 9.8 meters per second squared. I said, yeah, but how about in units that we use for anything else? How do you compare that with a Corvette, for example? And they look at me like I'm talking Swahili. 1G is 21 miles per hour per second. So at 1 G for 3 seconds, you're going 63 miles an hour, and that's a pretty hot car.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then I asked them, what's the speed of light? 300,000 kilometers per second. They all knew that. I said, well, okay, put that in units we can all understand. They didn't know, but it says about 670 million miles an hour. But then I asked him the key question. I said, how long does it take at 1 G to get to the speed of light? It's a multiple choice question, guys. 1,000 years, 100 years, 10 years, or what? How many think it was 1,000? And I went on down the 4. Plenty thought it was 1,000 or 100 or 10. A few thought it was 1. The right answer is 1. Well, finally, so they were a little embarrassed, because several of the professors thought it was 1,000. Then I got asked by the professor who was out to show I was an idiot. He could tell he was a little confused. He didn't know quite what this. Well, how come you haven't published in physics journals? I said, well, you didn't see my letter in Physics Today? That caught him up short. Well, no. But then he said, well, yeah, but you haven't given any papers at Physical Society meetings, have you? I said, no, look, I'm a member of the American Physical Society. I could give a paper, but why should I talk to a few dozen people when I can talk to hundreds or thousands when I speak on campuses? Well, I realized I stuck my neck out. Unfortunately, that night in Lawrence, Kansas, on the stage, there were people sitting there because there wasn't room in the auditorium.
There you go.
And I felt very relieved, frankly, because I'd thrown down the gauntlet. But so I will always remember Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to
I'm
all
sure
those
you
people
will.
on the stage, and I didn't pay them to go up there either.
No. It was so funny when you left your message on my recorder. Sam, I received this suite. I don't understand the significance of it. John and we played it back. I still save it. So it's so funny. Oh, gosh. But it's going to be an interesting time. We're going to, I think we'll
got an excellent speaker lineup.
Excellent speaker lineup. We're going to have a good time. I think everybody listening gets a chance to take a peek at it. It's very inexpensive. You won't even have to pay $4,000 to go to it.
It's only what, $20
right.
or $19.50 or something.
It's a bargain. It's $18.50 or something.
No, that's a deal.
That's $18.50 a day. So I don't know of too many other lineups like this that you can get at that value. In all honesty,
well,
John
that's true about it. That's
Dan and John are
for
doing
$19 for all those people.
Sure, they're doing this out of their real support for ufology and whatever else they're doing here. I don't quite understand, but I'm looking forward to it. God, I hope you have a great time out there in Saudi Arabia.
Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Riyadh.
Capital city, and it'll be at a shirt and 4 points or something like that.
Again, please give your site. Please give your site one more time. Though we'll have a link set up, but please give your site.
Yeah, we'll put your links on the website, Stan.
Yes.
Go ahead, give us that, and we'll put them on the site.
Yes.
Okay, it's www.stantonfriedman.com. You can get all my books from there, and I should add, there's one thing you get if you buy from me or from Kathleen that you won't get at Amazon. All the books are autographed, and the books by both of us are autographed by both of us. And no, we didn't ship books back and forth. We used book plates. I mean,
yes, that's one thing.
They're a little cheaper to ship.
Oh yeah, all my friends, when they come over and they look at the books, and they say, "How did you get Stan's?" I go, "Stan and I are friends." But besides that, if you get the book from his site, he will sign it. So both him and Kathleen, if they're both together as co-authors, please do that. Again, Stanton, thank you very, very, very much for this.
We have Richard Dolan on the phone. What's up, Richard?
Hey, doing all right, dudes. Happy to be on the show once again.
Of course, you're our regular.
Yes.
This is my home away from home.
This is your spot. This is the Richard Dolan spot, bringing us up to date on the crazy, wacky, nasty stuff that's going on out there, either in the sky, in the water, or even in your blood.
Sam's been
watching a lot of
3 cups of coffee, man. I got you beat, dude.
You missed a great interview with Stanton a little bit ago, Richard. It was great. That guy is just hilarious.
Oh, really now?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have a blast down in Lawrence.
Let's not talk about
we
that
get to
crazy place
corrupt
again.
them. Right? Rich, we get to corrupt them. We have a good time. Oh, boy.
What's on the platter today, Richard? What would you like to speak about?
Well, actually, let me. It just occurred to me. I just saw a documentary last night. It just came out in 2010 called "What on Earth Are They Spraying?"
Oh, that's I saw that. Man, is that a good one?
No,
Very, very well done.
Marla Hemingway.
That's the one where they did all the soil samples. I mean, this is like evidence.
Well, and that's right. What it looks like they are spraying, in fact, are three things: little tiny pieces, bits of aluminum, strontium, and barium. Because there have been enough studies, apparently at this point, that have shown that these are the things that are very highly elevated in soil and water, and what is supposed to be pristine snow caps. For example, on Mount Shasta, that they've got aluminum levels that are absolutely
They had like lethal levels
thousands
up there.
of times higher than what they're supposed to be.
40,000 times higher.
And that gentleman's private
Or
lake up
4,000
there
times.
in that same video, that guy's private lake didn't run into anything, was contaminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. They showed some video of these, I think,
Well,
coconut trees in Hawaii that are just falling apart, just peeling the bark right off, which is just, you're not supposed to be able to do that apparently. But yeah, I think the chemtrails definitely are being linked to that, and the question is, why are they doing that? One of the common theories, I've been acquainted with this theory for quite some time, is possibly to try to mitigate global warming. And the idea of that is that the aluminum is highly reflective, and so that less sunlight would reach the Earth. A certain amount would bounce off back into space, so reducing the effect of global warming. Of course, the problem is that aluminum is one of the nastiest poisons you could have in your body.
Well, it causes Alzheimer's too, or it's a major cause of Alzheimer's.
Absolutely, and it undoubtedly has other very negative health impacts on the human body and on the environment. And so, and it's in quantities that are extremely high. These are heavy metals; they're not supposed to be in your body like that. So, and then there's more nefarious theories that you really have to keep in mind. One possibility is you kill off organically grown foods, create a genetically modified version of the food. It's the classic problem reaction solution sort of scenario in which you've got they create the problem, and then they give you the solution. Buy these aluminum-resistant, genetically modified strains of food.
Right.
And we'll sell it to you. And then, of course, the third real nefarious possibility, and I don't know how true these would be, but would simply be global depopulation. Kill off the people.
Yes.
There's too many people in the world. We'll kill a few of them off. Whatever the answer is, one question that keeps coming to me is, what is the agency responsible for doing this? Because it seems
it's global.
Certainly to be beyond any government. It's global.
It seems to be the white KC-135s or NATO planes, and under the open sky laws of any NATO country, they can fly and do pretty much a volume of things. And one of the things that is under NATO is Agenda 21, which is to cull, depopulate, or do different things that are for all potential purposes ridiculous.
That's called Agenda 21. I had not heard of that.
Please check it out. Agenda 21. And the United States signed up to be one of the partners on it, and I think part of the spraying operation is multifold. Oh, yeah. Here we have aluminum and barium and what was the other one? I forgot. It was
strontium.
Strontium. Yeah, there's another one that'll kill you.
I know.
And all these things are mind-altering and also work as conduits when they get inside your system to make you very, very, very susceptible to EM fields, also to lower your immune system.
Well, I heard there's a theory out there that people actually, the government, whether it's our government or another government, they're testing all sorts of different chemicals released into the air that can depopulate an area used as a weaponized form of some sort of chemical that they're spraying in the air to decrease population.
Right. Another theory, actually, that I just forgot to mention that was discussed in this documentary, What on Earth Are They Spraying, was just weather modification.
Yes.
Which is bad.
Well, they've been controlling the weather for how many years?
Weapon.
Yeah. They've been using it for years.
Wasn't it just Saudi Arabia or something? It was just in the news. Was it Arabia? Or you might know, Richard. You just
no, it was Dubai.
Yeah, Dubai made,
Yeah,
was it 12 or 18 rainstorms or something?
Sure, they use ion producing mechanisms now to create storms. Ionization. And ion beam weaponry and using ions and ionization is a very classified...
You shouldn't screw with Mother Nature. I remember that being a kid. That was butter commercials or something.
Yeah.
I've always known that. Don't screw with Mother Nature.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you right now, I'm on a website of a company called Weather Modification. It's weathermodification.com. And this is a company that openly does weather mod. It's Weather Modification Incorporated. And on their site, I mean, there are all kinds of clients and projects, clients being nations here. Saudi Arabia is listed. This company's got a program, they call it here, Program for Cloud Physics Research and Rain Enhancement in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So they're doing it. I'm clicking the program, and it says here, products and services provided, atmospheric assessment, evaluation, aircraft for cloud seeding and atmospheric assessment and evaluation. So they've been working with them for
There's some things you shouldn't do.
a number of years to do this.
Well, here, stop and think of what's going on in Australia right now. It's just...
They got a tsunami in the middle of the nation.
Yeah, in the middle of the nation. 6 inches of water fell within an hour. 6 inches.
Unreal.
Unbelievable. Do you know anything about the volume of snow that fell in Mongolia
No,
in the last year?
I don't.
No, I mean, supposedly it's the same type of phenomena, but snow up in Mongolia. And I was wondering if you knew anything about that, Richard.
I don't, actually. That's new to me. And, I am quick with the Google searches, so maybe I can...
Bless your
Well,
fingers.
you know, back to the chemtrail stuff, Richard. I noticed at Christmas I was at my mom's house in Michigan, and they're notorious for snow, kind of like where you're at. And I was sitting out there, and something I never saw in my life. The snow was glistening like normal, but it was glistening purple, yellow, green, red.
Really? Where was this?
In Michigan. And I'm looking, I thought it was one spot, and it's a whole place. All the fresh snow is multicolored.
That just goes to show you
It's
how
all.
well our environment
It's
is.
got to be a chemtrail. I've never seen that in my life.
That's bizarre. And, you got to wonder, what would cause snow to glisten like that, except something in the snow itself?
Yeah, well, it was a glisten. I mean, the snow was pure white. It's just when the sun hit it,
Right.
it glowed. It was the strangest thing I ever saw in my life.
I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, there could be something bad about that.
Yeah, I would
if
guess
it's
too.
yellow,
Yeah.
if it's just permanently yellow,
I mean,
you
when
just
we were
don't want to eat it.
When we were kids, you could go out and grab snow and put some flavoring on it and eat it.
Yeah, but if it's yellow, don't touch
Well, no,
it.
that means someone else already flavored it.
Yeah.
I think there was a song about that.
Yes, there is.
Wait, you're not supposed to eat yellow snow?
Yes.
I happen to be a Frank Zappa fan, by the way.
I was going to say, were you a Zappa fan? Yeah.
Anthony thought it was lemonade.
What
from the
was
gods.
his children's Moonbeam, and what was his son's name? Wasn't
Well, it was Dweezil and Moonbeam.
Dweezil.
Unit.
Moon Unit? Yeah.
And Dweezil.
That was a normal
Dweezil.
guy.
Dweezil was the one. Damn,
That's
can
kinda
you
whack.
imagine
Let's
that?
face it.
Dweezil.
I'd like to grow up with the name of Dweezil.
Gosh.
You know, I want to take us off subject a little bit. Do you?
We are off subject.
Well, Richard? Are you familiar with the moon cover-ups? How there's
Depends on what you mean.
well, there's a theory
sure.
that there is
Moon
actually
blankets.
a space station of some sort on the moon,
On the dark side.
on the dark side or on the light side.
No, dark side.
No, I heard.
That's a darn good song.
No, there's a huge one on the dark side, so they say.
Yeah, well, there's some sort of space station.
I'll give you
for-
my opinion. My opinion is that there's a secret space program that's been going on for years, and that it includes some form of bases on the moon, and that includes the far side of the moon. Near side, I don't know as much, but I've spoken to people that I think, at least they're people that I take seriously, and they have absolutely given me reason to believe that that there is a permanent presence on the far side of the moon. Not just U.S., but U.S., maybe Russian, and definitely E.T.
And yeah, alien too, 'cause that's what they said.
I mean, we really haven't gone back, and from what I heard was something told them not.
I've heard that numerous things too, where we were warned not to come back.
You know why? They took the
That's been going on
towels.
forever.
That's
It could
why.
be true.
Right.
I think it's quite possibly true. I mean, I do believe that our astronauts went to the moon. That's my opinion.
Oh, I do too. I don't believe that crap that they did it in the studio.
Well, I think that, there were studios involved, but I think that our guys went to the moon.
Yes.
What I also believe, though, is that we don't know the whole story about what happened on the moon. I think that there were things going on there, and
Escamilla
personally, I
has.
think that they encountered non-human intelligence.
Jose Escamilla has a documentary out. I think it's called Moon Rising, and pertaining to what really went on, supposedly. And I was looking at bits and pieces of it. One of our witnesses from Tinley Park called me up and said, "Sam, did you ever see this?" And I was looking at it. It's a worthwhile documentary to take a peek at. Not everything there I see, as they're saying. Yeah. But one thing was the color. One thing they did note is the color, 50,000 miles out, everything starts to look colorful, but beyond that, it's chalk gray.
What, the moon's surface, you're saying?
Yes, there's color to the moon's surface when you get within 50,000 miles.
So that would indicate that what the photographs we're seeing are all
black and
modified?
Yes.
They're all black and white. There's no colored photos.
I actually just saw a colored picture of the moon last week, first time.
Mm-hmm. Where?
I don't know where I found it.
I grew up with color pictures of the moon. I remember as a kid.
Yes, of course.
I sent away to NASA for photographs, and I don't think these were artificially colorized. They certainly look like legitimate color photographs.
I saw one last week that was real color. It didn't look colorized either. I've seen colorized like on Mars and stuff. Some people have done some stuff.
But you can see blurred out areas.
Where they've done. There's JPEGs
where they've done.
The idea of color on the moon, though, that's a new one to me. I have to say, and I
take a peek at that.
Honestly, tell you, I'm skeptical.
Well, it's Jose Escamilla's. It's one of his.
I always thought the moon was green.
It's one of Jose Escamilla's documentaries.
I grew up. The moon was cheese. I saw that on TV.
You think everything's cheese these days?
Do you remember the old movie and the rocket went up there and it poked the man in the moon in the eye?
Yeah, that was. Well, actually, I cringed when I saw that. Ooh, gosh. My sister poked me in the eye with a punk. Remember the punks for the 4th of July?
I'm still thinking about cheese.
Back to the moon, though, and the secret space program, I believe this for a long time, that that deep black clandestine organizations have developed the ability to go off-world. I firmly believe that breakthroughs were made probably in the 1960s, maybe the 50s, in terms of our ability studying acquired ET technology. And one of these breakthroughs at some point involved what we would call field propulsion or anti-gravity, which would allow you to have the ability to go off-world. And it would of necessity not be something that they would want to share with the world. If you share something like anti-gravity, that means you've got another source of power probably, and that means that you're going to run petroleum right out of business as a fuel source. And so they wouldn't do that. But what they would do is to continue working that technology clandestinely, of course, and that would enable them at some point, I think, to go off-world. And if you can go off-world, you're going to create a base off-world.
Makes all the sense in the world.
I think that's what they have done, and that's what the rumors are continually coming back. The leaks, certainly nothing that we can prove right now officially, but it certainly seems like there are a number of leaks that point in that direction.
Now, on the notion of the new mythology that everything's our technology, we split maybe to some degree on some of that, but maybe not. I know Michael Schratt, you've used some of his research in your books or noted some of, footnoted some of his stuff.
I have, yeah. He was helpful on a couple of issues. When I was doing my second volume of history, I consulted with him on technical aspects of the B-2 stealth bomber. He was very helpful in that.
Now, what do you
couple of other
think
things.
about the notion of the B-2 being what was seen in the Hudson Valley?
No, I don't agree with that at all. This is Michael Schratt's opinion. I think he's completely dead wrong
Yes, I agree with you.
on that. I do not think in any way what those people were seeing is consistent with B-2
No.
at all. What they were seeing was a boomerang. A B-2 is angular, but it's not a boomerang. B-2 doesn't hover. The B-2 doesn't hover motionlessly at 500 feet altitude, shining, beams of light down like daylight. Not at all.
The other thing,
That's not what people were seeing.
Now, Roswell.
And by the way, the Hudson Valley sightings took place in the early 1980s, predominantly.
Yes.
Now, the stealth fighter, okay, was secretly operational in 82, 83. The stealth fighter, not the stealth bomber. The stealth fighter was operational at that time. That's a long way from saying that the stealth fighter was operating over the Hudson Valley. The stealth bomber was not operational at all in 1983 when the Hudson Valley sightings were going full guns. That came on a little later. Now, it's certainly possible that there were black ops prototypes out there. I do believe that our clandestine world has been flying some kind of triangle for at least a decade, maybe longer, maybe going back into the early 90s, maybe the 80s. There was a very excellent triangle sighting by a world-class aviation expert, a guy named Chris Gibson. He was in the UK at the time. This is, in fact, 1989. I wrote about it in one of my books. And he was watching two F-111s engaging in a refueling operation, or one of them was, with this perfect triangle. It blew him away. And this guy has a reputation in the field where if he saw it, you know it's true. He's written books on aircraft. He's one of these he competed in aircraft recognition contests, like they give you a certain number of seconds to identify an aircraft, and he did this. So the guy knows his aircraft.
Now,
and he was adamant that there was a refueling operation going on.
I've heard about this. Now,
not with
89.
Not an F-111. It was a KC-135. The triangle was like the size of an F-111, I think is what he said.
The size of an F-111.
Yeah, but it was a perfect triangle. So now, if this guy's right, we've been flying. I mean, clearly this would be an aircraft that's one of ours. Perfect triangle since the late 80s. So, and to this day, we don't have, officially speaking, any such aircraft. So this is the secret that would be kept for more than 20 years, if it's true.
Then some aspect of some of the sightings in Belgium may very well have been something pertaining to us.
It could be. If you read the explanations that the U.S. Air Force had at the time of the Belgian triangle sightings, because in 1989 and 1990, when people in Belgium were seeing these things, stealth technology was brand new in the public eye. All right, that was like the new big thing, and so the stealth fighter, which was newly revealed, is a bizarre looking aircraft compared with other aircraft. It does look somewhat triangular, and so the logical thing for people to say is, oh well, probably saw a stealth fighter. And the U.S. Air Force, in their explanations, gave very legalistic sounding denials. They said, we've looked into this and there is absolutely no indication that any of our stealth aircraft were involved in that. Okay, now, but that doesn't mean that some other black project wasn't involved.
One of those, what they call them, the TRs.
You don't know. There's something called the Black Manta, which has been discussed for years and years and years, and it's said to be a perfect triangle. I mean, very much exactly like, really, what the Belgian triangles were described as and photographed as.
Then there's the TR3s.
So regarding the Hudson Valley, it's possible. I mean, that Michael Schratt, back to his whole thing on the B-2, I don't think it was the B-2 or the stealth fighter, but I leave open the possibility, without a doubt, that what those people saw could have been an experimental, or not even experimental, but secret operational craft that is still to this day not revealed. My feeling is that it's ET, not human, partly because of the number of abduction experiences that are associated with the Hudson Valley cases. There aren't a lot that are known, but there are a few. And then the intelligence involved seems to be off the charts. One example, in one case with the Hudson Valley, I mean, ask yourself if a B-2 could do this. Woman is driving her car with her daughter on the highway, on Taconic Parkway, and she sees this boomerang-type object low over the highway. Daughter starts screaming hysterically in the back seat, which is a very typical response. The woman, however, gets out of the car. She's fascinated by this object that she sees, and she walks toward it. And she later recounted this. She said, and I was thinking in my mind, I was trying to communicate with it. And I was thinking the thoughts, come closer, I want to get a better look at you. And at that moment, she said, this hovering object started to move toward her, as if responding to her thoughts. That scared her. And she thought, get away, don't come any closer. And according to what she said later, the object stopped and backed away. Okay, now, if that's true, you've got to ask yourself, these things can get into our head. That's a damn sight beyond any kind of technology that the U.S. has that I'm aware of. It's B-2, F-117A, or anything else. Our craft don't do that. That would indicate to me that we're dealing with very, very super advanced and probably, in all likelihood, ET technology.
Now, say, for instance, Roswell, the Kenneth Arnold sighting. Now we're talking, I see artwork when they talk about the Kenneth Arnold sighting with these batwing type craft versus something more along the line of, say, for instance, the Rhodes sighting, James Rhodes.
Frederick Rhodes.
Frederick
I believe.
Rhodes? The one in
Sure.
The police officer in 47. Wasn't it 47 too? Or
Well, Frederick Rhodes was not a police officer. He was a citizen in the Phoenix area, I believe, who took two photographs in early July of 1947. They're the first authentic photographs taken during that whole wave of 1947 that we know of.
And we had a sighting out here of what I feel to be the exact same type of craft. It has the same configuration. And there's been multiple accounts of that pumpkin seed type craft with the concave back section.
Didn't Sean Robbins see something like that? Sean and Robin?
This was the person who saw that was Mike. Remember Mike?
Yeah.
From Freeport? He's seen that. Sean and Robin, remember back in June 21st, was it 2008 when you were in here? Did they explain some of the things that were going on and some of the things that they saw?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm remembering these offhand.
Okay. Well, they had some pretty interesting accounts of multiple types of objects. None of which that I really can't say, none of them appeared to be something that I would say would be of a terrestrial origin. Now, again, bringing up Michael, and I hate to pick on him, but Michael had mentioned that he felt that the Kenneth Arnold and Roswell case was basically our own technology, and I can't see it.
We're basically our technology?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know for sure any longer, but I suspect that it's not our technology.
Yes. I think we've had it.
Let me give you an example, okay? This is a story that, it's actually really an amazing story. When people start arguing that all these early UFOs of the 40s are of acquired Nazi technology, for instance, I hear this a lot. I keep going back to some of the cases I personally studied. I did research in the Canadian National Archives a few years ago, about 5 years ago, going through reports that citizens would write in to the Canadian government back back in the 70s and 80s, Canada had the National Research Council of Canada was like charged with accepting UFO reports from the citizens of that country. Not that they did anything about it; they didn't. All they did is they collected the reports and just kept them there. But there's a lot of reports that citizens would write in. I read one written around 1980 by a very elderly man at the time, and he said, and I've got a copy of it. He said, I don't really expect anyone to do anything about this, but I'm getting up there in years. I won't be around much longer, and I just want to make a record of what happened to me. In 1936, when I was working for the Canadian government military doing logistical mapping operations, they were mapping the Northwest Territory.
The Yukon area?
Now, the Northwest Territory, all you do is get out a map. It's an enormous area in Northwest Canada. It's huge, absolutely huge, way larger than Texas, almost as large as Alaska, I think. It's gargantuan. And there's nobody up there. Today, in 2011, the population of Northwest Territory, I think, is about 40,000 people. In the 1930s, it was something like 10,000 people. And think about that. So there's no population density whatsoever. So they were out there in the 1930s mapping it out because clearly Canada's a huge country and they needed up-to-date maps. So he's out there with a team of guys, but he's alone. And he'd have this little aircraft that could land on the water. So he's out in this one area all alone, and on a perfectly clear day, he said, 1936, all right? And he mentioned the exact lake that he was at. I have it on a map. Remote. To this day, it's remote. And he said, for some reason, I don't know why, I had the urge to look up above my head in this clear blue day. And he said, there was this object right above me. I couldn't tell how high up it was, he said, because there was no cloud cover whatsoever. And I couldn't really get a perfect idea of its distance, but it seemed like maybe 1,000 feet up, 2,000 feet up. Couldn't really tell. Hovering motionless, absolutely silent. He said it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And then he saw it turn, rotate, like so that it was facing east. It was like a disc-shaped object. It was like a perfectly roundish disc shape, but he said he could tell that somehow that it was turning, and then it took off. He said, absolutely instant acceleration. He said within about 1 second, it was at the horizon. About 1 second. Didn't make a sound. Now, I've got this account. This is one. There's a couple of other accounts that I have people with UFO sightings from the 30s.
See, that's what I like.
And you've got to ask yourself, Northwest Territory is about as remote a place as you could get in the 30s. What the hell was that thing above this man? That was not Nazi technology, to put it mildly.
Yes.
It's something that is so off the charts by standards today, much less nearly 80 years ago. We have to really consider that back in the 30s and 40s, there were agencies operating with revolutionary technology that was just not supposed to exist. And there is not any human agency that I can think of that could be responsible for that type of technology.
Not even in science fiction? Or that'd be the closest thing.
No.
Now here you have talk of, you hear the stories about the Nazis and Auckland, and when Admiral Byrd was down in, and called for reinforcements and all this stuff. What's your take on that?
Well, I've really lately been looking a lot more into that. Whenever my first volume of history of UFOs in the national security state, that was 10 years ago. In fairness to me, there was not a lot of information available about that. And a lot has come out in the last decade. It's one reason that at some point I want to revise that book. But there's a story. It was, I think, in a Chilean newspaper. And that, you can find a copy of the newspaper clipping. I have a copy of it. It's in one of the books by Joseph Farrell, who's probably the leading proponent these days of the Nazi connection to UFOs, and he's done some good work. There's no doubt that there was a newspaper account in, this is early 1947, so before Roswell, before Kenneth Arnold, the Byrd expedition to Antarctica, which was supposed to go for, I think, 6 or 8 months. It was a large expedition, and it was aborted. Okay, all of that happened. And there was an interview that he apparently gave, it was reported in this Chilean newspaper, in which he said, this is a paraphrase, but he said there are powers on Earth that we have to be careful of, that have the ability to traverse from pole to pole. Now, it was a one-time statement. There's no follow-up.
Interesting.
I don't really know what else we can make of it. There were allegedly diaries attributed to Byrd that describe this. I think that those are completely hoax, fictitious. But this statement in the newspaper, you know, it seems like a legitimate news story. So what does one make of this? It is true that the Nazis were interested in Antarctica. They were. They tried to claim an area they called Neue Schwabenland,
right,
which was really the prime real estate of Antarctica. They did an expedition in the 30s in which they flew over and dropped a bunch of swastika flags as if to claim it for themselves. And they were interested. There were missions. Hermann Goering was knowledgeable about these, in which they sent kind of an expeditionary, exploratory mission down there.
Isn't that the mission where they thought the hollow Earth was there and the Nazis were looking for the entrance?
I think that's part of it. Yeah.
I actually just saw that yesterday, I believe.
Really? Yeah. Now, it's not that the Earth is hollow, but
I don't think
clearly
so.
There might be underground capabilities, underground facilities. And look, the Nazis, by the way, were expert in underground technologies. One of the key things that the U.S. was interested in during Project Paperclip wasn't just rocket geniuses, and it wasn't just aircraft geniuses. It was underground tunneling geniuses. The Nazis had to be good at that because think about during World War II. They were getting bombed into smithereens, and if you were going to have any major production facilities going on, you needed to have secure underground facilities to do it, and they were very, very good at that. And so if you can go underground in Germany, you can go underground in Antarctica, conceivably. You go under the ice, it's just as manageable to live down there as it would be under the ground here, wherever we live. So I'm not ruling it out. I think that there could be something there. The problem that I have with explaining all early UFOs as Nazi is this. There's too many of them. They're worldwide. I don't understand the logic in any way. It would be like you've got this secret major world power that has been interacting with our civilization now for 80 years, 70 years.
That video I just saw, I was just talking about where they were at middle or underground there. It says they were doing that because there was UFOs and aliens under there supposedly, and that's why the Nazis are trying to get there. For what that's worth.
No, that on the face of it, I don't really have a problem with that theory. That's logical to me. That, in other words, there would be an ET presence that they had learned about in the 30s. Obviously, they would be just as interested in that as we would be in the 40s.
Right.
So, and if you learn that there's some kind of ET presence, certainly you'd want to learn as much as you could technologically from them. And if that's part of the Nazi UFO connection, I could believe that. What we need with all of these things is evidence.
Yeah.
Right. Theories.
Theories
are only
abound.
as strong as the evidence attached to it.
We need evidence
Theories
for
abound.
everything we talk about, basically.
Right, and science only demands, only requests two things: evidence to support the theory, and this is where so many people get off base. They never demand proof, and that's not something that would be. That's for dogma. the thing is, we have so much historical accounts, and I do love this whole the new series of Ancient Alien. I think it's one of the best, in the series so far. What's your account? And I know we have a lot of friends in there. And by the way, Giorgio is one of John's.
Oh, did you know Giorgio is actually?
Oh, they're good friends.
Did you know
Giorgio? Oh yeah, Giorgio Tsoukalos is definitely a very good friend of mine.
Giorgio's hair has got a Facebook page.
I like Giorgio. I was supposed to be on Ancient Aliens. Actually, they called me to do the second series, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. But it just never happened. I think my schedule and their schedule just didn't match. I would love to have been shot for that one, but
yeah, that would have been great. You're on enough stuff.
I intend to write a book on that topic in the future, by the way.
You know William Bramley, right?
Not personally. I'm not.
You probably read his book.
I'm trying to think. I'm looking on my shelves. What's the name of his?
Gods of Eden.
Oh yeah, I have that on my shelf.
One of my favorites. And what I find interesting, because it does correlate from one of my. And what's interesting about the book, it all started out him as he was looking into the history of warfare, the history of war, the history of why men go against each other and such. Warfare is just crazy. I mean, it doesn't seem anything like what we would really want to do as far as if we're gregarious or if we're actually humankind. It's nuts. It's psychopathic or it's counterintuitive.
It's funny you mentioned it. I have his book right here on my shelf, and I have not read this book.
You will love it.
I think I have some homework.
Yeah, if you take a peek at it, I'd like to, let's run through it, take a peek at it. Maybe we could talk about it next time, because I personally feel, as he does, there is an intervention of something outside of this earth, non-human, that at times insists on a culling, a depopulation, or a power, let's say, varying the power, the technology, and having it flow into the different hands. And it seems that way. And this is what he discovers. In fact, I'm not going to tell any more about the book, but take a peek at it, and maybe next time we could talk about it.
I think that's a good idea. The way that my reading goes, I have to be I'm very focused. Mm-hmm. I'm very task-oriented with my reading. So I have a number of books that I've acquired dealing with ancient UFO, ancient ET phenomena, but I haven't read them all, and that's only because I haven't yet started a project of writing a book about that. I'm still focused on doing really the modern UFO phenomenon. So as long as I'm writing about that, my reading tends to follow that pattern.
Well, when you ever get to that point, just say, "Hey, Sam, I did read that," or just remind me in one of our conversations or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, that was part 2 of episode 1. I hope you keep tuning back, coming back, subscribe, get your friends to subscribe. Please support the show. I really appreciate all my listeners and watchers, whatever you want to call yourself, but I'm just going to call you supporters. I appreciate it. My name is Aunt Kay. Please make your friends subscribe, share this, get this word out about the show. We like to show the information that we're providing on the show. We like to share the content that we are also presenting to you guys. It is very important to us that we do spread the word on what we discuss here. I'm Aunt Kay. Thanks for listening.